2-hour delays. People are being told to just basically shelter where they can.
This is tertiary students in Auckland City, AUT round, yeah?
Yeah, and we've heard of, flooding around those Queen Street, the main street, Simon Street as well. Traffic, as you've mentioned, is basically at a gridlock. Commuters are being told to just stay home, avoid unnecessary travel. Ferries are also being cancelled as well because of this severe weather. We've heard of a couple of closures. State Highway 1, parts of that are closed due to slips. I understand the Dome Valley, there's been a slip along that road. Waka Kotahi are working to kind of clear that. I spoke with them about half an hour ago and they were hoping to get that cleared by this afternoon. So that's kind of where we're at the moment. Waka Kotahi is basically telling, people walking and cycling not to go through floodwaters as well, because you never know what could be in that floodwater. It can be quite dangerous. I've had a recent update from Fire and Emergency just regarding the number of calls that have come in the last kind of 7 to 8 hours. So from 8 o'clock to 3 o'clock today, Fire and Emergency received 227 calls. Quite significant. It kind of feels like history is repeating itself with the floods that we saw a couple of months ago. More than half of these calls came through between the hours of 12 and 1, so that's just basically within a 1 hour period. 258 of those were from Auckland, so it's pretty ongoing. We are expecting more rain soon, but as you mentioned earlier, the Met Service has kind of downgraded.
Delphine Herbert, RNZ reporter, thanks so much. Great work.
RNZ News at 4. Good afternoon, I'm Marama Tipole. Aucklanders may be through the worst of another day of heavy rain and serious flooding. Met Service has drastically reduced the predicted rainfall in Auckland for this evening. It's now expecting about 12 millimetres of rain to fall in the region between 4 and 7 p.m. It had been forecasting 70 millimetres for around that time. Auckland Emergency Management Duty Controller Rachel Callagher earlier said emergency shelters had been opened.
In the event that people need to evacuate their homes, we are opening shelters and civil defence centres in areas where they might be needed. Already, Te Manawa Library in Westgate is open and full details will be uploaded to the Auckland Emergency Management website as new centres are stood up.
Fire and Emergency has received 277 weather-related call-outs today, most from Auckland. Its on-call commander for Tāmaki Makaurau, Brad Mosby, says about 1/3 of the calls were urgent. Met Service says 90% of Auckland's annual rainfall has fallen in the last 4 months. Papakura Marae has opened its doors for residents who need shelter from the floods. Marae Chief Executive Tony Kake says about 5 streets in the South Auckland suburb have flooded.
Well, they reckon the worst of it is about to hit around 4 or 5 o'clock. So, it's been pretty bad as it is. Again, if people are feeling a little bit anxious because of the, Gabriel cyclone and just that they've had before the marae, we're good to go right now. So come on down if you need a dry place.
Auckland Transport says some flooded roads are beginning to clear. Flooding blocking all southbound lanes on State Highway 1 between Penrose Road Overbridge and South Eastern Highway off-ramp has now cleared. Flooding in Albany and Silverdale has also receded and all lanes are now clear. Several other lanes remain closed, most notably State Highway 1 on-ramp at Esmond Road northbound and State Highway 1 South Eastern Highway off-ramp southbound. An Auckland resident is worried her house will have again flooded in today's deluge after water reached her garage this morning. Amrita Augla says she's not living in her Swanson home after it was yellow stickered in the anniversary weekend flooding. She says she checked on her house and found the garage filling with water.
It is a worry because I'm now thinking it's only been raining for 2 hours and this is the situation. Imagine if it was going to run for until what they're expecting it to rain up to 9 p.m. I'm more worried that the water might go into the house again.
Retail workers in Auckland's Dominion Road have been working to keep water out of their shops. Vape 602 worker Danny says he'd had some supplies at the ready.
Luckily, I still got some materials and some piece of wood in the shop. I just make a simple, just like a small, blockage, just to block the water. But I don't know how long can they hold it there.
The principal of Whangārei Boys High School says search and rescue teams are still trying to find a Year 11 student who has gone missing at Abbey Caves. An outdoor education class went caving this morning but got into trouble in bad weather. The school's principal, Karen Gilbert-Smith, says the students were helped at the scene by search and rescue teams and St John Ambulance. They received further medical checks back at the school and were reunited with their whānau. Ms Gilbert-Smith says her immediate thoughts are with the family of the teenager who is still missing. The school will be open tomorrow. In other news, former Labour Minister Meka Whaitiri has taken aim at her colleagues, accusing Labour of censoring Māori women on her return to Parliament. The Ikaroa Rāwhiti MP made her parliamentary debut as an independent this afternoon after quitting Labour last week. Meka Whaitiri told the House she was now free to speak her mind.
I am very pleased to stand in this House to say I have joined a party that enables the voice of wahine Māori to be heard and not censored in this House.
The leaders of Te Pāti Māori were ejected from the House after welcoming Meka Whaitiri with a whakawātia without permission from the other parties or the Speaker. And Parliament has voted to congratulate King Charles on his coronation, but not every party has supported it. The vote was the first thing on the House's agenda today, even ahead of a ministerial statement on Auckland's flooding. Labour, National and ACT all voted to congratulate the King. Te Pāti Māori and Meka Whaitiri voted against the motion, while the Greens and Elizabeth Kirikiri chose to abstain. That's the news. We'll have a very special edition of Checkpoint very shortly with Lisa Owen, but in the meantime, let's have a look at our weather. Now, Met Service New Zealand have issued red severe thunderstorm warnings for parts of Auckland, Rodney Gulf, Auckland City, Hauraki, Franklin and Albany. This line of severe thunderstorms is moving towards the east. The thunderstorms are expected to be accompanied by torrential rain. Having a look now at the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Wednesday. From Northland to Kapiti, also to Bay of Plenty, including the central high country. Rain, some heavy with possible thunderstorms and localised downpours spreading east this afternoon or evening, easing for a time from the west tonight and early tomorrow morning. For Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, mainly fine, but showers about the ranges, some heavy. Wellington and Wairarapa, rain developing this afternoon, easing to isolated showers tonight. For Bulla, Northern, Western, Nelson and Marlborough, heavy rain or showers with possible thunderstorms in the west, turning to showers in the east this evening and showers becoming isolated tomorrow. Fiordland and southern Westland, rain with heavy thundery falls easing tonight, showers tomorrow easing later. For Canterbury, mostly cloudy with scattered showers. Otago and Southland, scattered rain becoming widespread tonight or tomorrow. Snow lowering to 400 metres tomorrow evening. And for the Chatham Islands, a few showers today, rain, then showers tomorrow. Now the Met Service forecast for the mountains up to midnight Wednesday. First for the North Island, Ruahine and Tararua ranges, showers developing this afternoon with possible heavy falls, isolated thunderstorms likely tomorrow. Snow lowering to 1,000 metres tomorrow night. The remainder of the North Island mountains, showers some heavy and possibly thundery, but easing for a time tonight and tomorrow morning. Falling as snow above 1,100 metres in the south, and for the winds, gale northerlies turning strong to gale northwesterlies overnight for Tuesday. Now for the freezing level, 3,100 metres lowering to 1,800 metres in the north and 1,400 metres in the south late tomorrow. For Te Waipounamu, Kahurangi and Nelson Lakes National Parks, heavy rain turning to showers this evening, some heavy and thundery, showers turning to snow late tomorrow or overnight. Kaikoura Ranges, rain easing to isolated showers tonight. Arthur's Pass down to Fiordland National Park. Showers, some heavy and thundery today. Showers easing between Aoraki Mount Cook and northern Fiordland later tomorrow and may clear in the west, falling as snow in Fiordland overnight tonight and elsewhere late tomorrow. For the winds, northwesterlies, gale north of Mount Cook easing tonight, strong to gale southwesterlies spreading north tomorrow, and a freezing level of 3,000 metres, sloping to 2,300 metres in Fiordland and lowering to 1,300 metres, but 700 metres in Fiordland tomorrow. RNZ National, I'll be back with our headlines, and the time right now is 8 minutes past 4.
Tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki Checkpoint Te Tēnei Rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Welcome to this Checkpoint special on the severe weather hitting the upper North Island. We'll be with you until 6:30 tonight, bringing you the very latest from across Auckland and Northland and other areas in the firing line. The Met Service has issued 15 weather warnings and watches across New Zealand. In Whangārei, a rescue operation was sparked after a group of high school students and their teacher were caught in a local cave in deteriorating weather. The fate of one of the students is unknown. We will have the latest. Right now, Auckland is under a state of emergency following flash flooding. Mayor Wayne Brown, who is in Sydney, made the declaration remotely and has delegated his powers to Deputy Desley Simpson. And torrential rain forced several Auckland schools, the museum and zoo to close early and has put already traumatised and displaced residents on edge. The city has been in gridlock for most of the afternoon as workers were urged to go home. Fire and Emergency has dealt with more than 200 weather-related incidents, most within a 2-hour period. Authorities are warning another deluge is expected about now and through the commuter hours. This is causing chaos for public transport and significant travel delays. We begin tonight in West Auckland, where homes have been flooded once again. Our reporter Louise Tanous is in Dombuck Road in Massey and joins us now. Louise, I can hear the rain. What is it like out there?
That's right, Lisa. There was a bit of a brief reprieve from the rain here in West Auckland, but it's started to come down again now extremely heavily. And I'm just beside the Swanson stream, which is extremely swollen. It has subsided a little bit, but it's worth mentioning that just a few hours earlier it was up about a metre onto the road and it's severely swollen. It's a very busy road here on Dombuck Road and it's extremely wet and pretty unsafe out here as cars are racing to get home from work and school. Now, we've been out here this afternoon speaking to residents. Some of them have been here before. West Auckland has been repeatedly hit in this flood-affected area. Some of these residents have had to leave their homes and muck in and stay with friends and family tonight, but for some of them they still haven't recovered from those first Auckland anniversary floods where they're still living in yellow stickered flood damaged homes. So this is really the last thing that they needed right now.
And Louise, what can you tell us about evacuation centres?
Yes, so evacuation centres are being set up across the city this afternoon, and the one that's closest for West Auckland residents is at Te Manawa Library in Westgate. That's been open since 1 o'clock this afternoon and will be open into the night, but there's no confirmation on whether or not that will be open overnight for residents to stay. But certainly in that 4 to 7 p.m. period where we're expecting that heaviest downpour, residents can go there for safety.
Thank you for the update, Louise. That's Louise Tanous, who was in Dombuck Road in Massey. While it's deja vu, Auckland's in a state of emergency again as the city is hammered by torrential rain and flash flooding. It's put already anxious and displaced residents on edge once more. Met Service has issued a severe thunderstorm and heavy rain warning for Auckland and Aotea Great Barrier Island through until 7 tonight. Emergency Management Duty Controller Parul Sud joins us now. Parul, what is the latest?
Kia ora. So as you said, we still expect a band of heavy rain to come across Auckland region between now and 7 p.m. So I guess further downpours are possible with localized rain rates of about 20 to 33 millimeters possible as well. So just while it's a bit of a lull where the rain might have stopped, we could expect some more.
So how bad has the flooding been, say, compared to the other two severe events that weather has suffered in Auckland recently?
Yeah, so I guess this one has been a bit different. The earlier one in January was really, really intense and was really quick. But in this one, we've actually had a bit of a break in terms of the rain has stopped, so the water can flow away. However, we have seen quite a bit of disruption. As you can imagine, out west where I live as well, there are roads with surface flooding quite a bit. We've had approximately 490 stormwater-related calls come in, which are majority of them were to do with surface flooding. Only about 18 to do with habitable flow flooding, which means houses getting water in.
So you mentioned West Auckland. A lot of those areas got absolutely slammed in the earlier events. Muriwai, Piha, Bethells Beach. What's the situation out there? And do we have any news about any further land movements?
Not that I'm aware of at this point in time. All we would say is be aware of how the land might, behave in terms of what is coming and what the water might have done. So our message to residents is to be mindful of what may happen with the rain that has come today and what might be coming a little bit later as well.
So your biggest concerns right now are what?
So our biggest concerns would remain that people, while they're trying to get from point A to point B, be careful while you're traveling. Avoid unnecessary travel because you may get stuck because of water. You might drive into floodwaters. In case your home has got flooded and you need to evacuate and you cannot lodge with a friend or family, we do have the community's defense centers and the civil defense centers and also some community-run centers where you can go. And we are ready to provide accommodation as well to those people who might need to evacuate.
How well prepared was the council this time round?
I would say we were quite prepared. We actually stood up the centre yesterday, and we also did a bit of a story on it, or making people aware of the fact that this rain was coming, bad weather was coming. And we have had the team in the Civil Defence Centre since morning as well. So I think a much better coordinated approach to the event and a lot of conversation with our key stakeholders.
Parul, what can you tell us about public transport? Because we're hearing reports of people having to wait significant amounts of times for buses, even though people were advised to leave work and go home.
Yes, unfortunately, that is the current state of play in terms of public transport and train delays and also, being stuck on road because of the floodwaters as well. So it's unfortunate that people will have to wait, but I think you just have to be careful and cautious in terms of how you travel from where you are and maybe consider whether you do need to travel at this point in time or can you wait for a little bit longer.
Thanks for the update, Parul. That's Parul Sood, who is the Emergency Management Duty Controller. It is 4:15. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. The wild weather is now bearing down on the Coromandel. The area still has major damage and closed roads from the last bouts of severe weather. Civil Defence Controller Gary Towler joins us now. Gary, how is it looking where you are, please?
Hi, Lisa. Yeah, well, we have the rain that Northland and Auckland have or are experiencing is coming our way. We've possibly got another, just looking at the radar, maybe another 3 or 4 hours of the intensity of it before it passes through. We've got multiple slips right across our local roads and our state highways. Some of them are small, some of them are just a few rocks, but the driving is the issue now, as well, of course, as our ongoing land instability. We've passed a milestone today, Lisa. We've had our entire annual rainfall today of 3.5 metres already this year.
Wow, that's not something you want a prize for, is it, Gary? So, in terms of communities, are there any areas that are completely cut off? You mentioned some road slips.
As at the moment, no, there isn't, but we expect once this passes through and we can get to some of those sites, there will be surface flooding which will temporarily isolate some of the communities, more likely the northern half of the Coromandel, where we've got many isolated communities. At the moment, it's not severe. We're still in monitoring mode. It's just a big deluge over quite a short period of time. Most of the rivers and everything, they're still under, the alarms have gone off, but they're not intense. We're getting about 40 mils an hour, which we can cope with at the moment. But it's the aftermath. It's tomorrow and the next couple of weeks where we're just going to get these ongoing slips, which we have had pretty much every day. They're just new ones or old ones expanding. And that's going to be the issue for us. It's land instability.
Gary, any thought that you may have to evacuate some people, or is anybody leaving voluntarily from certain areas?
No, we've put enough warnings out, Lisa, and I don't think there's any need at this stage of proceedings to evacuate anyone. And if they were feeling unsafe, they would have already left.
Gary, what kind of prep could you do for this in advance, knowing that you were going to get another thrashing?
So what happens is, we've got very experienced roading crews, and they move gear around to the areas where we anticipate that there could be issues, and these are the normal flooding and slip areas, along both the main state highways. We do quite a lot of comms, and we have 30 community response groups, and these are little groups in each community that we communicate directly with, and so we gave them good warnings and Once again, we're dealing with possibly the experienced residential communities of Coromandel rather than a lot of visitors. So hopefully the resilience pays off in these cases.
So you got a bit good news today, an announcement about State Highway 25A. You'll be hoping that doesn't get any worse over this time, because we've been told the land is still moving there.
It is. It's very fragile up there, as is the whole Coromandel. And, so it is a great announcement. At least there's some certainty. It's not the best because we've got another summer of quite difficult travel ahead of us. But at the same time, it's good news that we are going to get a result. And, let's just fingers crossed that the engineers can weave their magic and we get a nice bridge.
Gary, before you go, any specific messages you want to get out?
The message today, Lisa, at the moment is driving. If you have to drive, please take care. There's debris all over the place. There's surface flooding all over the place, and just prepare for delays.
Best of luck, Gary. Thank you again for your time. That is Civil Defence Controller Gary Towler on the Coromandel there. They're just getting hit about now, but the worst is still to come for them. Back to Auckland now, where people have spent hours waiting to get a bus out of the city this afternoon.
I'm annoyed that there's been at least a couple double-decker buses with seemingly no one on it, and it's just been driving past us. And it's annoying because there's a lot of people just waiting here, and we just can't really do much except wait more.
I wouldn't at all worry if I was told you have to wait now till you get to the bus, and just stay in my office and do some more work. But to come here to find out that it takes 2 hours, that's the bad part.
A bit of communication would have been nice, maybe a few officials showing up, since the council's being run from a building that's within sight. So, yeah. There's no buses to the shore. That's the real issue.
There's no buses to the shore?
None that have arrived.
Our reporter Lucy Sear is in central Auckland and joins us now. Lucy, you've been speaking to commuters. What else have they had to say?
Kia ora, Lisa. So commuters are very frustrated at the lack of information from Auckland Transport, including the ETAs. They don't know what they can do, and some have given up, to be frank, and have left the bus stops. So the crowds at the bus stops have reduced from, I'd say, over 100 people to perhaps just about 30 people. But I do know that around 15 minutes ago, there were about 4 buses that arrived, North Shore buses, but some people just couldn't get on those buses. I spoke to one gentleman who had waited 3 hours and he couldn't get onto any of those buses because they were just so full.
And Lucy, looking at the roads, how is traffic flowing right now?
So all major roads in the CBD are still at a standstill. We have Queen Street, Simon Street, Wellesley Street, all completely blocked. And even some of the narrow streets of Lawn Street and High Street are gridlocked. And I can just smell the mixture of petrol and moisture in the air.
Thank you, Lucy, for that update. That's Lucy Sear in central Auckland there, where she's telling us it's pretty much gridlock still, and some people have been waiting hours and hours for buses. If you are out there in the city trying to catch a ride home, let us know how it is. If you're at a particular bus stop, which areas are flowing, how long have you been waiting, what are the queues like? You can text us on 2101, tweet us at checkpoint.rnz, or the email address is checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Also interested in your area, if you're experiencing particularly bad weather or flooding, do let us know where you are, what road conditions are like. Now, as you heard there, it's been a bit of a rough ride for Auckland commuters today with torrential rain and flash flooding disrupting services, and it isn't over yet. All trains out of the Britomart Transport Hub in the central city were cancelled earlier today, and surface flooding caused disruption to some bus routes too. Joining us now is Derek Coper from Auckland Transport. Kia ora, Derek. How about you start off by giving us a bit of an overview? What services are disrupted currently?
Kia ora, Lisa. Look, a changing situation, but currently we still have disruptions on our rail network with trains running on Western and Eastern line with reduced frequency, so it's more than 20 minutes in between trains. We're prioritizing people leaving the city, and trains are running at reduced speed as we still await clearance to ensure that the track is safe after surface flooding in parts of the network. On the bus network, we still have disruptions and delays due to some diversions where there has been a flooding across some roads, and buses have been diverted. And we also have speed restrictions on Northern Busway with some surface damage to that road. And ferries are delayed by combination of the crew shortage and weather events. So overall, still quite a bit of disruptions. One area which probably is impacted most in terms of people getting home is around Newmarket, Ellerslie, where we still have a lot of customers waiting for buses that are coming through, but they are full. But we have more buses coming in to take them home.
When you say you've got more buses coming in, have you called drivers in? Extra?
Many of our bus operators had to run school bus services earlier, as some schools decided to close earlier. So as soon as those services were completed, now we have more buses coming in to those areas where we have a congestion at bus stops, particularly around Newmarket, to take those customers home. So those buses will be there probably in about half an hour.
And what kind of waits are there in other areas for buses? We've had someone tell us that we're waiting 3 hours. So for a bus that came past that had enough spots to take someone on, what are you hearing about wait times?
Yeah, so around Newmarket, we've heard about 2.5 hours for some customers. So it is. We know that some customers have been heavily or badly impacted, and we empathise with them. And we're trying to do our best to get more buses in there. Services that travel through Newmarket are already full by customers boarding them early on in the city. So we're trying to get more buses in there to clear those congested bus stops.
Derek, when you say you're giving priority to people leaving the city, what are you saying? Are you putting drivers and train services on outbound journeys from the city and leaving inbound a bit leaner, or how are you doing this?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. So typically in the peak, we have majority of the services going almost like a one-way. So they are prioritised to go back to the city to run unbound service. We're probably going to do a similar thing with the trains as they can travel at faster speeds. But with buses, we're adding more buses into the system in the peak now to carry more passengers, because the buses departing from the city are scheduled, so they start where they're supposed to, but they're getting full very quickly. So come to Newmarket, for example, there is no space available. So we're trying to get additional services from those areas to go south and east.
How many extra buses can you get on?
At the moment, we've got 6 coming, and hopefully most of the clearance from the city is almost done. There are not many.
6 doesn't sound like many, Derek.
Doesn't sound many, but at least now we've got buses every 10 or so minutes from the city, and those buses are not as full anymore. So there'll be space on those buses coming through those bus stops.
How do you reckon you've done with communication this time around? Because I noticed Richard Hills, the Auckland councillor, was putting out on social media, hey, can we get some more information? Have you been communicating properly, efficiently and quickly with your customers this time round?
We have communicated as soon as we had more information to provide, and the situation with so many customers deciding to leave the city, evolving so quickly, we communicated as soon as we had information to share. So we definitely think that's a lot better than maybe in the past.
Okay, while we didn't know exactly how severe this weather event was going to be, there's been warnings for a few days that bad weather was coming. So did you do prep ahead of this? Did you call extra drivers in? Did you make allowances to have extra buses on standby ahead of today?
Well, we already have driver shortage, Lisa, as you know, so we did the best we can given the resources that we have, and we relied on the forecast that they came in. I think overall what surprised us a little bit maybe is just that the quantum of people leaving the city so early, that we didn't have as many buses available at the time, and the congestion with so many people in cars leaving have also slowed down the number of buses circulating between start and finish of their trips.
Thanks for that information, Derek. That's Derek Coper from Auckland Transport. Again, we'd love to hear from you if you're waiting for a bus or a train. 2101 on text or tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. Let us know how it's going out there. A rescue operation is still underway at Abbey Caves near Whangārei after a group of students got into trouble in the bad weather. Emergency services were called there at about 10:30 this morning. The group from Whangārei High School included 15 Year 11 students along with the teacher and an instructor. The school says most of the students have been reunited with their whānau, but one teenager is still unaccounted for. While joining us now is Whangārei Mayor Vince Coccorillo. Kia ora, Vince. What do you know about what's happening at the caves?
Well, what you just said is what the most of it I know at this present moment. We're still keeping in contact with the police and as they're leading the job at the moment.
What can you tell us about that area and what sort of signs or warning signs are there?
Look, the Abbey Caves is actually a site which is it's a wilderness area which has got a public car park, it's got public toilets, it's well signposted. It is part of the open wilderness though, and the public can be there, and it's unstaffed by anybody.
And can you tell us, is there water flowing through the cave? Is it a river? We understand it's a waterfall. Can you give us a bit of an overview?
Look, all caves have a degree of complexity. These caves here, they do have caverns which have got water in them. They do have waterfalls. This is all part of the underground environment that we have in Whangārei.
I know there'll be time for this later, but do you have concerns about the fact that those students were in there given the weather forecast?
Look, that's not something that I can really comment on. At the end of the day, this is something that the school needs to go through and discuss with the families. We, from the council side of things, we just try to make sure things are as safe and as enjoyable as most people can have at the time.
Give us a bit of an idea about what's been going on in the city today. Have any particular areas been hit badly?
Look, we've had quite a bit of rain from the Glenvervie area, which had 57 millimetres of rain in the last 24 hours, through to Ruakaka, which has had 102 millimetres of rain in the last 24 hours. So we've had quite a bit of rain in some areas, which does mean that the Brenduans and the Dome Valley have been closed and closed again after 9 days of being open. So it does put a little bit of strain on our state highway network, and also people have to get in and out of the district.
Vince, can you be more specific there? Are those roads remain closed in both directions, all lanes? What is the scenario?
Yeah, at this present moment, both, as far as what I've informed and what I've checked on through the NZTA website, that both the Brenduans and the Dome Valley are closed in both directions. We've got Waipu Cove Road, which is a local road, that's also closed as well. And that's all because of the rain and the intensity of the rain and the slips that have just happened on it.
Cripes, you must be wondering when you're going to get a break in terms of your roads.
I was always wondering that, yes, and this just puts down the reinforcement once again that we need more roads, more work done by the government on our state highways, and Northland once again needs to have that expressway.
Appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us. That's the Whangārei Mayor, Vince Cockerillo there. It is 4:30. Homai o whakaaro. We would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the program this evening. Do get in touch. Let us know what the situation is like in your area. If you're catching public transport, we'd like to know also what kind of waits you're facing out there. 2101 on text. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It's time we go to the headlines. Ko marama anō tēnei.
Thank you, Lisa. Auckland's emergency management says while there is a lull at the moment in the rainfall hitting Auckland, it is still expected to continue until this evening. Duty Controller Parul Sood has told Checkpoint there are concerns for people trying to get home in the rush hour commute, with severe delays across public transport and on the roads. The agency is opening evacuation centres if people require them, and the principal of Whangārei Boys High says her immediate thoughts are with the whānau of a student still missing after a party of 17 were trapped in the Abbey Caves this morning because of the rain. We'll have more news at 5. Just having a look at some more traffic updates. We heard some just now of Lisa. Auckland Transport are advising the following: West Harbour ferry services have been cancelled due to a high level of debris in the water after dark. That's the West Harbour to Auckland 5:20, 6 o'clock. Also Auckland to West Harbour 5 to 6 and 25 to 7. And a train update for you from Auckland Transport. Western Line is running at a reduced frequency and reduced speed. Onehunga Line is suspended until further notice. The Southern Line is running at a reduced frequency at line speed, and the Eastern Line is still running between Manukau and Otahuhu. The time is 4:32.
Ngā mihi. Okay, let's get to some of your feedback. A number of you trying to get home at the moment. This person says, my husband walked from Wynyard Quarter to One Tree Hill. That is a hike. It took him 2 hours, but faster than his colleague who took public transport or drove. Another says 3.5 hours by car from Devonport to Auckland Uni, Princes Street this afternoon. Must be a record, yeah. Not one you'd want to break. And another listener says, a CBD update. I've been in my car, stuck in the Wilson car park on Kitchener Street across from the Auckland Art Gallery since 2 p.m. Is that because the queue is too long and you can't get across? Wow. Another says deluge in Nelson and Richmond. Raining all day, rivers and streams, fast running and very high. Another listener says in the Bay of Islands, the rain is now eased to a drizzle. And Jan's got in touch to say raining out west again, not as heavy as it was earlier, but areas already flooded will get worse. Yep, and that is the warning we had earlier from emergency management, saying that it's a bit of a lull and we can still expect some heavy rain up until potentially 7 o'clock tonight. Parts of Whangārei Valley on Auckland's North Shore have again been flooding. Our reporter Luca Foreman is there and joins us now. Kia ora, Luca, what's it looking like?
Well, the rain's been pretty steady out here. There was some surface flooding earlier on Port Ana Road near the Whangārei Valley Pack and Save. That's mostly cleared now. Just keep in mind this is an area that was pretty badly hit in the Auckland anniversary weekend floods. So people here are keeping an eye out for the heavy rain. The Whangārei Creek is looking quite high and flowing pretty quickly. So it's just a case of a bit of a wait and see at the moment to see how much worse the rain will get.
Yeah, and given that they got hit really badly last time, have businesses around there been doing much prep? Do you see any sandbags or what have they been doing in anticipation?
Yeah, a whole lot of sandbags. People have been pretty wanting to be safe rather than sorry. So people have been out there with the sandbags. I spoke to a car dealership that have moved pretty much all of their stock up into the back of their shop because last time they lost about 20 cars to flood damage. Pack and Save was closed for a bit, but now it's reopened and looking pretty busy. People look like they're heading there to stock up on some supplies. But many of the businesses that I spoke to, a lot of them were still actually doing repairs from the Auckland anniversary weekend floods. So, yeah, it's pretty tough for some of them if it does get a bit heavier.
Absolutely. Now, did you drive out there, Finn? Sorry, Luca, did you drive out there?
Yes, I did. It took a fair while. The Harbour Bridge was pretty chocker. It was about an hour and a half to get here from the city. It would usually probably be a 20 to 25-minute drive. So I imagine with all those people heading home, trying to pick up the kids from school, it was a bit of chaos and pretty blocked up.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Luca. That was Luca Foreman. And now we're going to Finn Blackwell, who's on Dominion Road in Auckland and joins us now. Finn, tell us about where you are, please, and how it's looking.
Kia ora, Lisa. Well, I'm on the corner of Dominion Road and Ewington Avenue, where the traffic seems to have picked up from the central city. It's moving fairly clearly, but the weather is staying the same as the rest of the city. It is very steady downpours here and windy. The wind has picked up quite significantly, and it's a cold, biting wind, Lisa.
Tell us about the traffic too.
Traffic seems to be fairly clear. There's moments where it gets quite heavy and backed up between the traffic lights, but currently, as I'm standing on the side of the road, it's flowing fairly freely. I've seen a number of buses go by, packed, getting people out of the central city, and motorists seem to be going about their business on the roads around here.
Thanks for the update, Finn. That's Finn Blackwell joining us there. Just a reminder, if you're joining us, a state of local emergency has been declared in Auckland. Heavy rain and thunderstorms are affecting the region, and the severe weather is expected to continue into the evening, potentially through until midnight tonight. It is 23 minutes away from 5. West Harbour School was among several schools that had to put the call out for sandbags as heavy rain hit. Principal Vicky Hitchcock joins us now. Hi Vicky, how's the school?
Hi, how are you? No, we're good. We got everyone with that rain that as it decreased this afternoon, we managed to be able to get all the children home safely. So I didn't close the school, but we were very fortunate. The sandbags that we just had to use in one particular area were fabulous. Fortunately, the streets around West Harbour had drained by the time our babies went home, so that was really good.
So, Vicky, did you have sandbags on standby, or did you put the call out and get some help?
No, we put the call out, and then we several staff went up and purchased some from a local hardware store.
So how hard and fast did it come, the rain and the weather?
Oh, that was probably the greatest flooding we've had in this particular area over the cycles that we've had during this year. And so, yes, it was actually, I wouldn't say it was a cascading flood or anything like that, but the carpet got soaked very quickly, and we could see where it was coming in through at the side by a wall. So we're going to have to do some major investigation. We'd already cleaned the spoutings and done all the maintenance prior, but no, the water came in. It was a good strong, whatever's between trickle and stream. But the kids were great, and my staff are fantastic.
So carpet damage. How many classrooms, Vicky? I think we might have lost Vicky. Are you still there? No, I think we have lost Vicky from West Harbour School there. As she said, they had water into the classrooms, had to sandbag. Several schools in West Auckland sent their kids home early because of the torrential rain. Obviously, people in Auckland being warned to stay vigilant with the weather expected to keep coming between now and potentially midnight tonight. And right in the commuter hour, now until 7, potentially some of the worst rain back. There's a bit of a lull at the moment, but be warned, we are told, from Met Service and emergency services to be on alert for further rain. I think we're going to go back to our earlier story about the cave rescue that is still underway near Whangārei. Now, one student remains unaccounted for after Whangārei Boys High School, a trip that they took to the Abbey caves, was hit by severe weather. Most of the Year 11 students have been reunited with their whānau. The school says it plans to open tomorrow so they can maintain some routine for staff and students. Peter Crossley is a caver, and he did the original survey of the Abbey caves, and he joins us now. Hi, Peter.
Hello, Peter here, yes.
Hey, tell us a little bit about the caves. What are they like? What kind of water is in there? A bit of an overview, please.
Okay, well, they're public caves now. They didn't used to be, but way back in the late 60s, 70s, they belonged to a quarry people, limestone people, and then it was turned into a public reserve. So it's open for everybody to go and have a look at. And they're about 200-300 metres from the road. You go down the road to it. And there's 3 caves there in a line. No.
How deep do they go in, Peter?
Sorry, I was just being told that I'm on the radio. So I'll come back.
Indeed you are, so do carry on. How deep can you go into the caves there, Peter?
Well, straight below, they're horizontal. So straight beneath the surface, they're only about 10, 20 metres at the most beneath the surface. But the three caves there, the top one, which is about 200 or 300 metres long. The one in the middle is about 150, and the one at the bottom is 100 metres in length.
And where does the water come from there? Is there a waterfall, an underground river? What is it?
No, the water at the top end one, just comes out of the paddock and disappears down a small hole, which you can't get into. And that actually goes through a bit of a rock fall into a cavern which you can't get into. Well, I can, I know the way, but normally people can't get in that way. And then it goes into a stream passage and also a dry upper level. And that would be, I assume, the place that the school kids would be going into. The dry upper level is dry, it's quite pretty. There's quite a lot of formation in it. The lower level is a stream passage, let me think, about 2 metres wide, 2-3 metres wide, 2-3 metres high perhaps. And normally in summer it's about ankle deep through to mid-thigh deep.
Okay.
Quite pleasant.
So Peter, do you have any knowledge about how heavy rainfall would affect that water flow in the cave, and how long it would take to filter through to the caves?
Very rapid, I would say. I was wandering around on my place today, and the way the water has come up on ordinary farmland, it just rises very quickly, or within an hour of it being really heavy, it would be in there. And while it's a very pleasant little cave in summer, ankle deep to mid-thigh, that's in the top one. The other one's about mid-thigh to navel deep, and the very bottom one to get out the bottom end would be chest deep. But no big deal. You get wet, it's quite pleasant. But in this sort of rain, you wouldn't catch me in there. Definitely not. No way.
You wouldn't go in with a weather
way.
forecast like the one we had?
Personally, no. No, definitely not.
Are these caves suitable for novice cavers?
In summer, yes. I wouldn't take toddlers into the bottom two. They'd get a bit wet. Perhaps I might, with a fellow caver and knowledge, there'd be the kids would be on my shoulders to carry through the deep bits. The top bit with a bit of adventurous kids, but I would only have a small party, say, a small family party. You'd have a couple of adults and no more than a couple of kids to go with you, 2 or 3 kids.
So,
no more.
How well mapped and known is that cave network?
How well known?
Yeah, and how well mapped. So we've got a rescue operation. So would all the nooks and crannies of that those connected caves be mapped in some way? Would rescuers have access to that information?
Pretty close. I would say. Well, I don't know. I'm not up there.
Yeah.
I'm not on the spot. I don't quite know. I did talk to one of the senior cavers down who lives in Waipu, and I know him well, and I know he's good, and he knows the cave itself. So he would know that, and I think there's always nooks and crannies. Between the caves there are rock falls, and if the kid got swept downstream, they could get trapped in rock falls and not be found immediately.
What about light? Are those caves, do they have natural light coming into them?
No. Dark as, a witch's cauldron or whatever you like to call it.
And
very,
daylight
very
hours,
black.
even still dark, Pete, down there?
There's even in daylight hours, the light, you wouldn't go more than 10 metres into the entrance before it's pitch black.
Thank you so much for joining us with that, Peter. We appreciate your time. That is Peter Crossley, who is a caver, and he did one of the original surveys of the Abbey Caves. That is where a rescue operation is underway in Whangārei after Whangārei High School group there got into trouble in the bad weather. 1 student is still unaccounted for. By 2 this afternoon, Fire and Emergency had responded to 200 calls for help around Auckland. Most of those came in just a 2-hour period as the city was hit by torrential bursts of rain. Brad Mosby from FENZ joins us now. Brad, what kind of jobs have you been called out to?
Yeah, kia ora. Our firefighters across Tamaki Makaurau and Northland have responded to around 289 weather-related calls for help. Between 8 a.m. and 3 p.m. this afternoon. And half of those calls have come between the hours of 12 and 1. So that was when the most, rainfall came through both Northland and Auckland.
Yeah, and how would you characterise the call-outs and what kind of help were people wanting?
So most of our call-outs have been to flooding-related events. And most of those are minor flooding, so flooding that we wouldn't deem life risk or property risk. And so our Fire Communications Centre have been triaging the calls to ensure that we focus on the more important ones first.
And are you coping with the volume?
Yes, we are. So we have crews out and about at the moment attending to call-outs, but we also have many crews in reserve just in case. So currently we are coping with the call rates.
Would you characterise any of those call-outs as rescues or evacuations?
So in Tamaki Makaurau, we are not carrying out any rescues. We have been assessing some landslides that are causing concern for homeowners.
Tell us a bit more about those. Whereabouts are those, Brad?
Mainly up in the Whangāparoa area. So one of our call-outs up there was to assess a slip that was causing potential concern for a resident, and that's been dealt with. We are getting some other minor slip calls, but nothing too serious. We've had a couple of cars that have been in floodwaters, but the people inside the vehicles were able to get out prior to our arrival.
You mentioned land movement. Obviously out in West Auckland it was a major issue. Has there been any reassessment out there or any calls to those sites?
No, we haven't been to any incidents of concern in West Auckland today. Our emergency service partners and Auckland Emergency Management have geotech experts. Also, our urban search and rescue teams that we have on today have that expertise. So they are on standby. If we did have any call-outs of that nature, then we would have an instant response.
Brad, just before you go, quickly, what's your message to people who think they need help? When should they call you?
Sure. So just bear in mind that we are receiving many 111 call-outs, and we do urge our communities to call us out if you feel your life or other lives are in danger, as well as threats to your property. For the minor events, there is likely to be flooding that could cause you concern in your homes and in your basements and on your property. So those minor events, if you could just stand by and see if the flood waters will recede over the next couple of hours, or if it's still there and the rain event is over and you need some support, then call us out. But at the moment, we're still trying to prioritise our calls for those of most serious.
Thanks for your time, Brad. Appreciate it. That's Brad Moseby from Fire and Emergency New Zealand there. 285 calls so far of people needing assistance in the rain in Northland and Auckland. Now, the Minister for Auckland has made his way to West Auckland, where he's meeting with residents affected again by the severe weather. Our reporter Louise Tanuth is there and joins us now. Louise, what's happening?
That's right, Lisa. So we're remaining here on Dornbach Road by the Swanson Stream, and Minister Michael Wood has recently arrived to meet with residents from West Auckland. Members from West Aucklanders Flooding, Lyle Carter, that we spoke to, are here today as well. And what they're talking about is the frustration from residents about the infrastructure of this bridge, which of course the Swanson Stream flows through, and it's still extremely swollen. And residents here are saying that that bridge is responsible for some of that massive flooding that they suffered from on the Auckland anniversary weekend floods. And they want action, and they want it now. They're extremely frustrated. Some of these residents that we've spoken to don't have anywhere to sleep tonight. Some of them will be going to that shelter at the Manawa Library, but others are hunkering down with family and friends. And they're really frustrated because, again, this is not the first time that they've been through this. So Minister Wood is literally sheltering here under umbrellas, meeting with frustrated residents here in West Auckland, and they're hoping for some answers.
And Lou, what's the situation with the weather? More rain on the way? How is it there now?
Yeah, it is starting to get a little bit heavier here. We are expecting that downpour around, from now until about 7 p.m. So it is getting a lot more sodden. Umbrellas and raincoats are well and truly out, and that stream is flowing pretty fast there. So people are keeping a close eye on that because, of course, just earlier today it was gushing out onto the road and traffic is still flowing through, but people driving will need to take care.
Thanks for the update, Louise. That is Louise Tanuth joining us there live from West Auckland. Now, if you are just joining us, this is a Checkpoint special, and we're going to be with you until 6:30 tonight with the very latest on the severe weather event. Auckland is in a state of emergency. A civil defence centre has been opened in Te Manawa Library in Massey, and Auckland Emergency Civil Defence says the centre can provide beds, blankets, food, water and welfare support. Earlier, we caught up with Rasib Hossan, who was watching the river levels rise in Swanson. He says his property has flooded twice already in the last 2 years, and they haven't yet settled the claim with his insurer after the last flood.
I'm paying near about $4.5 grand for my mortgage of this property where I'm not even living. So, I really don't know what's going to happen if it happens again. And it's not if it happens again, it's just a matter of when it happens again. And that's tonight when the high tide hits at 10 o'clock. I'm sure, we'll see another devastation in this area.
Lyle Carter, the head of a lobby group formed after the January floods in Auckland, West Auckland is flooding, left work early when he heard reports of the flooding starting. When RNZ caught up with him, he said locals are becoming experienced at dealing with floods.
Oh, we got the action, the escape plan down to the T. We've had many times to practice it, but I think going forward, our community and the rest of Auckland that are experiencing flooding need to have assurances and trust in our local and central government that they've got a plan to help keep us safe and secure going forward.
And Swanston resident Dan is also still dealing with insurance issues after the January flood. He too was nervously watching the stream rise.
I can't do anything about this just to resolve my anxiety. Because last time what happened, rain stopped, but the river level continued to rise. And we were quite relaxed because no rain, but we were affected so much.
There was major traffic congestion as many Aucklanders attempted to get home early on already flooded roads before the weather got any worse. Some students at the AUT campus were having to wait more than 2 hours for buses. Theo Elliott waited for over an hour for one bus.
There's no real information about it. A few buses come past, but they're either full or kind of cancelled type of thing. Like there's a 22R that's coming past now, but that's not stopping here.
And let's get to some of your feedback now. Someone said, yay, Western Line trains are operating. Well, that's a little good news, isn't it? The rain has now eased to a drizzle in the Bay of Islands. Someone again reporting things up north seem to be easing off. Taupō, one listener, Sue, reckons it has been absolutely pouring with rain for the last 2 hours. So be aware, if you were getting public transport out of the city, there's a bit of a crush to get on buses. Some people waiting at stops have told us they've been waiting more than an hour when the buses go past. Some of them are full. Auckland Transport told us earlier in the evening that they're getting more buses online. 6 other buses and buses that were driving school routes are now transferring onto other routes to help get people home. Now, Muriwai resident Pete Clouston's home was red stickered after Cyclone Gabrielle, and he joins us now. Hi, Pete. How's it looking out your way?
Pretty wet. Yep.
Yeah. So, how do you feel when it starts to rain these days after everything that you've been through?
It's the first heavy downfall that we've had since the cyclone. The only good thing about it is there's no wind. So I think that's going to be a good factor here.
Does it put you on edge, Pete?
What's that?
Does it put you on edge? Does it make you feel nervous?
Sorry, I'm sorry. I'm a little bit hard to hear here in the caravan because it's raining. We've only got a tin roof, so it's like the rain comes down. It does put me on edge a bit. Yeah, sort of. Kind of a little bit like deja vu. Because we had the wind the other week, and then like the whole caravan was moving around, and there was rain. But now this the amount of water that's been happening, and now it's piss. Like now it's coming down again, and it's in a way, I think it's a good thing because if the trees are going to fall, a bit more water is going to make them fall, and then we can maybe look at the cleanup, because at the moment it's kind of impossible to go and clean up the slip. Yeah.
Pete, you talked about rain on the caravan roof, right? Explain to our listeners where you are living at the moment and what your situation is, please.
Yeah, we got sort of washed out of our house, and it's been red stickered on Middleway on Domain Crescent, and we were sort of had nowhere to live for a week, and we spent a few days in the car, and we ended up through Smiley Caravans and Kumu, and I'm going towards Westgate. And through the campground, we were able to get a caravan. So we've been living in the caravan for the last 3 months. My son and myself and my cat. And it's been pretty tight, but it's like at the moment, the amount of rain we've got is like 4 inches of rain outside. We've got a little tent out, like a party shade, and that's it's full of water at the moment. So it's been a bit tricky. The
sounds
caravan's
tough,
getting
Pete.
the caravan's getting black mold all over the ceiling, and it's quite cold at night now. So not looking forward to the winter at the moment.
Exactly, and with the weather like it is now, what have you been told about the prospects for your house that's been red stickered?
It was a rental property. My friend owns the property, and he's at the moment they can't do anything because of the situation above the house. So at the moment we had 50 minutes in the last 3 months. We've had 50 minutes to go to the house and grab whatever belongings we could grab, and that's the only time that we've had in the last 3 months to go and get stuff out of the house. So So at the moment they're still trying to work out what they're going to do with the property, whether it's going to be what level it's going to go to. But at the moment it's red stickered, and I just feel really sorry for my friend because that was his retirement thing. He was going to set up as a bed and breakfast, and and he just feel like a lot of people have had the rug pulled out from underneath them out here, and I feel sorry for everyone, and you can see it on their faces too. You drive past it, you see your friends, and no one's normally Muriwai's a very spiritual place, and everyone's in a good buzz, and everyone's about surfing, and at the moment everyone's sort of still people walking around with their heads down, and it's sad. Yeah.
It's flippin' tough, Pete. Thank you so much for talking to us. That's Pete Clouston, who's a Muriwai resident. He is living in a caravan at the moment in the torrential rain out there today as we get hit again in Auckland by severe weather. Just very quickly, a police statement has come in saying the search for a student missing in the Abbey caves will be suspended this evening. They say it's suspended from around 5 p.m. They can confirm the group was made up of 17 people in total. 14 students and 2 adults make up the group of those who are accounted for. 1 student remains unaccounted for. The search is expected to resume at first light tomorrow, and a cordon will remain in place this evening and overnight. The Northland District Commander says this is a tragic incident, and we understand many will be impacted by what has happened today.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Good afternoon. Ahi Mārie ko Evie Ashton tēnei. Auckland remains under a local state of emergency after a day of torrential rain. The downpours also swept across Northland, where 1 student is missing from a school caving expedition. Most areas across Auckland region were hit by rainfall of up to 35 millimetres an hour, causing flooding across some roads and creating gridlock on main routes. Fire and Emergency received 277 weather-related call-outs by 3 o'clock today, most from Auckland. Hundreds of commuters waited hours for public transport after many buses, trains and ferries were cancelled or delayed. Auckland Emergency Management says there will be 6 civil defence and community shelters open for anyone needing shelter overnight. Met Service has updated its forecast and now expects the heavy rain to be lighter than first expected, clearing by 9 o'clock this evening. However, Auckland's Emergency Management Duty Controller, Parul Sood, cautions they are still expecting a band of heavy rain to come across the Auckland region between now and 7 p.m.
Our biggest concerns would remain that people, while they're trying to get from point A to point B, be careful while you're travelling. Avoid unnecessary travel because you may get stuck because of water. You might drive into floodwaters.
It was a traumatic time for residents already dealing with insurance problems from January's flooding. Swanson resident Dan was earlier nervously watching the local stream.
And it looks very bad because as soon the water hits the bridge, this area will be flooded completely and the water will rise pretty quickly, and it will affect first these houses, and then it will, if it's not eases, all area will be affected.
Torrential rain and widespread flooding led many schools in Auckland to close early today. Wesley Primary School Principal Lou Reddy says they're ready to serve as an emergency shelter if needed.
We're not too worried like we were last time. It was very stressful. This time we're a lot more prepared. The response from the families have been fantastic.
Lou Reddy says some families are still living in emergency housing after the January flooding. Public transport is sluggishly beginning to move again in Auckland. Auckland Transport says additional bus services are on from Newmarket to Otahuhu. The Western Line and Southern train lines have also resumed at a reduced frequency and reduced speed. The Eastern Line is still running between Manukau and Otahuhu. Ferries between Auckland and Birkenhead have been replaced with alternative transport.
The Year 11 student was at the caves with his outdoor education class when they got caught in floodwaters this morning.
Search and rescue teams are still trying to find a school student who's missing at Abbey Caves near Whangārei. The boy was with a group from Whangārei Boys High School that got into trouble in bad weather. Jean Edwards reports.
The Year 11 student was at the caves with his outdoor education class when they got caught in floodwaters this morning. The school principal, Karen Gilbert-Smith, says the other students were helped at the scene by search and rescue teams and St John ambulance staff. She says the school will seek to understand what happened in time, but for now her thoughts are with the family of the teenager who is still missing. Parents have voiced their fury on social media, saying the student should never have gone on the trip with such a terrible weather forecast.
A short time ago, police suspended the cave search for the night. It's expected to resume at first light. In other news, Te Pāti Māori says it's being punished for trying to follow tikanga when welcoming Meka Whaitiri back to Parliament today. Ms Whaitiri returned as an independent MP for Ikaroa Rāwhiti this afternoon after quitting Labour last week. Both Te Pāti Māori co-leaders were kicked out of the debating chamber this afternoon after performing a whakawātea for her. Speaking on Parliament's concourse afterwards, Rawiri Waititi says this was unfair.
What we did was appropriate, absolutely appropriate. This House is supposed to be a place where people are liberated to say what they want to say if they're elected members, and that hasn't happened today. So we've been punished for doing our jobs and for ensuring that Meka had a safe transition over in the House.
To sport now, and the Warriors coach Andrew Webster doesn't believe referees in the NRL are cheating. Social media comments from One New Zealand boss Jason Paris challenged the integrity of the officials after the Warriors' latest loss. Webster says the club has a different view to their main sponsor.
There's not one part of us think that the referees are going out there to purposely hurt the Warriors' opportunity to win a game of football. I want to be strong. I feel like their integrity should be intact and they're doing a great job. There's times where we get frustrated, like any coach, but I want to be clear that that's not our stance and that's not how we feel.
The Warriors are currently 11th on the competition ladder. The Black Caps spinner Rachin Ravindra wants to become a genuine all-rounder and even has his eyes on opening the batting. Ravindra came in at number 7 during the recent 4-1 one-day series loss to Pakistan and only batted twice in the 5 matches, scoring 9 and 28 respectively. He took 3 wickets in yesterday's 47-run win in the 5th and final ODI as New Zealand avoided a series sweep, and Ravindra has big plans to contribute more with the bat in the future.
It's a massive sort of, value in a team if you have someone who can bat and bowl equally well. So that's definitely something I want to keep improving in my career going forward, if I could be a genuine all-rounder. And then hopefully one day could be at the top order.
The Black Caps take a break until August when they play a 3-match away T20 series against the UAE. That's the news. Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Wednesday. Northland to Kapiti, also for Bay of Plenty, including the central high country. Rain or showers, some heavy, with possible thunderstorms and localised downpours, spreading east this afternoon to evening and easing for a time from the west tonight and early tomorrow morning. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, mainly fine, but showers about the ranges, some heavy. Wellington and Wairarapa, rain developing this afternoon, easing to isolated showers tonight. Bulla, Northern Westland, Nelson and Marlborough, heavy rain or showers with possible thunderstorms in the west. Turning to showers in the east this evening, showers becoming isolated tomorrow. Fiordland and Southern Westland, rain with heavy thundery falls, easing tonight. Showers tomorrow, easing later. For Canterbury, mostly cloudy with scattered showers. Otago and Southland, scattered rain becoming widespread tonight or tomorrow. Snow lowering to 400 metres tomorrow evening. And for Rekohu, Chatham Islands, a few showers today. Rain, then showers tomorrow. The time is 7 minutes past 5. I'll have traffic news and headlines for you at 5:20.
Kia ora rā e ho. Tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai, ki checkpoint I tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Welcome to this special as severe weather continues to hit parts of the country tonight. We will be with you until 6:30, bringing the very latest from across Auckland and Northland and other areas that are in the firing line. As we go to air, 15 weather warnings and watches remain in place across New Zealand. In Whangārei, the search has been suspended for one student who remains unaccounted for after a Year 11 outdoor education class encountered bad weather on an excursion to nearby Abbey caves. Our reporter Tom Taylor is there and will go shortly to him. Torrential rain has forced several Auckland schools, the museum and zoo to close early and has put already traumatised and displaced residents on edge again. The city's been in gridlock for most of the afternoon as parents were urged to pick up their children early from school and workers were asked to go home early if they could. Fire and Emergency has dealt with more than 289 weather-related incidents across Northland and Auckland, most between midday and 1 this afternoon. The bad weather has brought the city to a standstill and caused chaos for public transport. Auckland Transport says additional bus services, express from Newmarket to Otahuhu, have been dispatched and buses 774, 775, TMK are now available to go through on Tamaki Drive. The Western Line and Southern train lines have also resumed at a reduced frequency and a reduced speed. The Eastern Line is still running between Manukau and Otahuhu. Ferries between Auckland and Birkenhead have been replaced with alternative transport. Meanwhile, the city remains under a state of emergency following flash flooding. Mayor Wayne Brown is in Sydney and made the declaration remotely and has delegated his powers to Deputy Desley Simpson. And she joins us now. Kia ora, Desley. What is the current situation in the city?
Kia ora, Lisa, and look, thank you for that update. That's fantastic. You're doing great. Look, we've had a pretty crazy morning. It's been a focus of us all day, really, and as you've expressed already, it has caused a lot of disruption. I think what I want to cover now is what's up for this afternoon and this evening. So there were new bursts of rain coming through Warkworth about 4 o'clock, and these are still coming through Auckland, East Coast Bays, and then central Auckland around 6 p.m. tonight. So it is still a lot of rain. We think there'll be downpours of about 25 millimetres per hour pretty much until 7 p.m. So we are expecting a bit more flooding, but after that we are hoping that it will die down a bit. So we are terribly much on watch, and we will continue to remain vigilant. Look, this isn't the same levels as rain as we got in January. In that event, we had 12 hours of continuous rain. There's a very technical term our Met people use, and it's been that it's very wiggly. In other words, it's sort of come and go. I've been in the city at AEM all day, and there have been periods where there has been no rain, but it is coming through in wiggly patches. I mean, the good news is we haven't had any disruption to power that we know of at this stage. Drinking water and wastewater and sewage are all okay. What is of concern are the transport issues around PT, rail, which you've covered, and ferry services.
Why do we fall to pieces with public transport when there's rain?
Look, I think we did get notice around this. I think the issue was the rain came down and went over the train lines, and as soon as that happens, they have to stop. And because it came at a time, the rain came earlier than was expected, right? I mean, this is the thing with weather. You always think one thing, it always does something different. And it was just a matter that Auckland Transport had to turn around real quickly to put buses on to replace those trains as much as they could in an off-peak time when they were scheduled, to be less than what they were in peak hour service. So in other words, you had a peak demand in an off-peak time. And that made it challenging for Auckland Transport.
Given that the weather warnings have been in place for a little while, do you think they could have been better prepared, Desley?
Look, probably, but as I said, that did come through a little earlier than expected. You might have to address that more to Auckland Transport. But we're much better, I think, with our comms and with our quick reaction, but it's always going to be a challenge for Auckland Transport. It always is, because the rain will disrupt train lines, it will disrupt the ferry services, it will disrupt buses and public transport, and it will put pressure on our roads for vehicles. And it will, rain will cause surface flooding. I mean, for all the cleaning of cesspits that you can get, if it's autumn, and if you can clean them and 5 minutes later and the leaves fall down, they will be blocked. And you will get surface flooding on the roads, which causes disruption. We've had some slips area that's just sort of turned into waterfalls because the vegetation has gone. I know that happened in Tamaki Drive. So it will always be challenging. But we did put out the Auckland emergency alert just to alert Aucklanders of the seriousness of the nature as soon as we knew it was going to get as bad as it did.
You said you think the response has been better this time. Is that because you're in charge?
Oh, no. No, I think all credit actually to Auckland Emergency Management, who yesterday had a meeting. We knew this weather was coming. Auckland Emergency Management, we asked them to get together, and they got all the fire and emergency and the services together yesterday and had a plan ready for this. So they were prepared.
Have there been any evacuations, Desley?
My understanding is there have been some. We have stood up 2 locations, one in Albany and one in Westgate, but no forced ones, only self-evacuations.
Understand. Now, you mentioned that the rain is coming and going, bit wobbly, right? I suppose the thing is that the land around Auckland and beyond is utterly saturated.
Correct.
Has there been any assessment of some of those west coast areas that were severely hit with landslips? Have your geotech people been out there? Has there been any assessments of, say, Muriwai, Karikari, Bethels, Piha?
We haven't had any reports yet, but our geotech people have already been on site because, of course, we opened Piha just the other day and they've been monitoring that road. So we know that the geotech people are out there. I've heard conversations here with people talking to the Muriwai, Karikari and Piha people, but I haven't got a report as to the up-to-date situation as of right now. But I know that they are in communication with AEM, yes.
So, Desi, what's your key message to people? As you're warning there still could be more to come.
Look, my key message at the moment is go home, stay home, at least overnight. It should clear. You should be all good to go tomorrow. It might be still raining, but it won't be, the localised downpours won't be what they were this morning. It should clear and dissipate overnight. But we will be keeping all media outlets updated as to that. Please check on friends, whānau, family, etc. As I said, we haven't had any power outages, but, as soon as I say that, there might be. So, make sure you've got a torch and keep close to media outlets. And when in doubt, look at the AEM website and the websites and Facebook pages and social media channels, and we'll be sharing those from Council's perspective as well.
The Minister for Auckland, Michael Wood, is out in West Auckland, or has been out in West Auckland, talking to some very concerned residents. You can imagine they are so nervous after the last situation. Have you been in communication with the Minister at all?
Yes, I have. In fact, he was due in here a couple of hours ago, so he's probably bypassed here and gone straight out there. We do have the Deputy Prime Minister in here at the moment. She was very keen to have an update of the situation, and I have left that update to come and talk to you.
Okay. And when are you expecting Wayne Brown back?
I am expecting him at midnight tonight, but I will know whether that plane is all good to go and land. He's supposed to leave Australia, I think, on a 6 o'clock plane. So we will touch base before that to make sure he's actually on it and the plane is due to land in Auckland as expected.
Really appreciate your time, Desley. Thank you for stepping out of that briefing. That is Desley Simpson, who's the Deputy Mayor, but the powers of the Mayor have been passed to her. He's delegated his powers. He's in Sydney at the moment and declared that state of emergency remotely, as she said, probably due back at midnight tonight, all things being equal with flights and the weather. It is 16 minutes after 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. One student remains missing tonight after an outdoor education class from Whangārei Boys High School became trapped in nearby Abbey caves during an excursion this morning. The search has been suspended for the night and will resume at first light tomorrow. 15-year 11 students, a teacher and a guide were on the trip when Principal Karen Gilbert-Smith says they encountered a severe weather event. In a statement, she says one student is missing and search and rescue teams are looking for them. She says the remaining students have had a medical assessment and have been reunited with their whānau. Meanwhile, Whangārei resident Sue lives near the Abbey caves, and she told our producer Matthew Hutching it had been raining through the night.
I live in central Whangārei, but it's a road that leads out towards Abbey Caves Road, but it's been raining all day. There's a really big creek, the Whareora Creek runs right down there, and all the creeks have come up all around town. A lot of the streets are flooded as well. At one point this morning, I would have described it as similar to Gabrielle, very heavy rain.
Sue's Road is the main thoroughfare to the caves. She says just after midday she saw emergency vehicles driving past.
I saw two ambulances flanked by police cars driving back into town. There were no sirens, but the police cars had lights on. So things it's probably not looking very good.
And she said there is a mix of grief, frustration and anger in the community there today.
It's all very sad, and people up here are also very angry. We shouldn't be sending tamariki on school trips, and putting them in dangerous situations. The weather was bad, and Abbey Caves is I think the website says, don't go down if it's raining. Everyone's going, this is crazy. Why did they take them down? It's just ludicrous. And it's very sad. Very, very sad. Yeah. I mean, people have been praying for these boys, but, we shouldn't have to.
And that is Sue from Whangārei there, speaking to our producer Matthew Hutching. Our reporter Tom Taylor is in Whangārei and he joins us now. Tom, what's the latest?
Hi, Lisa. So I'm at the entrance, or one of the entrances to Abbey Caves. It's been blocked off here by police at both the north end where I am and at the southern entrance. Search and rescue teams have been here all day searching for the one Year 11 student who is still missing. He was one of 15 students to enter the caves alongside a teacher and an instructor. So just as of 5 p.m, police have suspended the search for the missing student until the morning. They're expecting that to resume at first light, and the cordon that's here will be remaining in place overnight. Superintendent Tony Hill of the Northland Police says that this was a tragic incident, but he's saying that police will not be speculating at the moment on what has actually occurred until the incident becomes more clear what has actually happened here.
And Tom, what does the school have to say?
So the principal, Karen Gilbert-Smith, put out a statement this afternoon. In it, she's saying that the events today have just been hugely upsetting for everyone involved. This was a Year 11 outdoor education class that went on a caving trip, meant to be an enjoyable experience by all accounts, but just encountered the really severe weather that much of the country has been encountering today. So she says all other members, apart from this one student, have been supported at the scene by the search and rescue teams and the St. John Incident Response Team. Those students then returns to the high school. They receive further medical assessment there and could then be reunited with their whānau. The principal's saying that they're currently just focused on the well-being of students, whānau and staff involved in the event, plus the wider community there. And that's going to be done with the assistance of iwi in the area and other agencies. And she's saying while there will be questions to be asked about what exactly happened here and how it was able to happen, for the moment they really just want to be supportive of all the students within the school. So with that in mind, the school's going to be reopening tomorrow for a sense of routine and normality, and they will be providing more information just as soon as that becomes available.
And Tom, how is the weather looking right now?
Well, actually, right now, it seems to be clearing up a wee bit. So I drove up from Auckland today to get to Whangārei, not through the Brynderwyns, which would have been the most direct route as that was closed amid some more heavy rain. Driving up a lot of the road really was just covered with surface flooding, so that needed to be navigated quite carefully there. It was torrential rain most of the way, with the windscreen wipers kind of going full blast. But yeah, like I say, as we speak, it seems to be clearing up, and according to Met Service in Whangārei, what little showers there are remaining should be clearing up this evening.
Thank you for that, Tom. That is Tom Taylor there, who's at the entrance to the Abbey Caves in Whangārei, where the search for the missing student, Whangārei Boys High students, has been suspended until tomorrow. It is 5:22. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Homai or whakaaro, we would love to hear from you. Let us know what it's like in your part of the motu, 2101 on text. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or the email is checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Time for us to go to the headlines. Anea Evie, mena pitipiti kōrero.
Auckland's Deputy Mayor says there's still a lot of rain coming for the region this evening and expects there'll be more flooding. Auckland remains under a local state of emergency after a day of torrential rain. Desley Simpson told Checkpoint there have been some people evacuating themselves and severe disruptions with public transport. She says the disruptions were caused because the rain arrived earlier than expected, which put the transport system under stress. The head of Civil Defence on the Coromandel Peninsula says he's expecting another 3 or 4 hours of intense rain before the front passes through. The region has now surpassed its normal annual rainfall, with 3.5 metres of rain falling since the beginning of the year. Gary Towler told Checkpoint conditions aren't severe, but the weather is being closely monitored. A man who lives beside Abbey Caves, where a student is missing, says the group from Whangārei Boys High School shouldn't have ventured into them in bad weather. Rescuers have suspended a search for one teenager after 15 students, a teacher and an instructor became trapped in the caves this morning. Ian Calder says it's too dangerous for people to go into the caves in torrential rain. And in other news, Te Pāti Māori co-leader Dawiri Waititi says the whakawātea he and Debbie Ngārewa-Paka performed for Meka Whaitiri in Parliament this afternoon was appropriate for the occasion. The pair were kicked out of the House as they hadn't asked permission. Mr Waititi says they're being punished for trying to follow tikanga. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic, State Highway 10 in Northland, Kaio to Mangonui, the roads closed between Omaunu and Whangaroa roads because of flooding. State Highway 16, the Kaukapakapa to Wellsford Road, a fallen tree is blocking the road northbound near the Bar Road intersection. State Highway 14, Maunga Tāpiri to Dargaville, reports of flooding. There's a lot of surface flooding in Auckland, of course, so don't travel if you don't have to. State Highway 2, south of Waihi, the road is closed because of flooding near Kelly Road. And south of Rotorua, State Highway 30, there are reports of a slip blocking the road near Bryce Road. Last in the South Island, road snowfall warnings are in place for Arthurs and Lewis passes, State Highway 73 and State Highway 7 until 11 p.m. tomorrow. And finally, State Highway 94, Te Anau to Milford Southland. If you're on the road, you're advised to carry chains. There's plenty of snow around there. Our next traffic news and headlines are at 5:40.
Kia ora rā e ho. Amrita Ojla's house was inundated in the anniversary weekend floods, and her West Auckland neighbourhood has been hit again today. She's also part of the advocacy group for affected residents, West Auckland is Flooding, and she joins us now. Kia ora, Amrita. What is the neighbourhood looking like at the moment?
Pretty wet and quite devastating to see and go through the same situation again. You know, we've only just come off a traumatic event, and here we are again reliving it. It's just, not the best.
You must get nervous every time it rains almost.
Oh, absolutely, because obviously the house is yellow stickered, but, I couldn't sleep last night thinking, oh my God, tomorrow, I don't know what tomorrow is going to bring in, because, we're still paying mortgage on that house. It's not a house, it's a home, but my baby was born, so I can't just let it go.
And has it been damaged further today, do you know?
Probably would be, because obviously the bridge was flooded again. The water has gone into the garage again, and looking at how the weather is going to be tonight, probably, obviously the more water sort of gets onto the garage, under the house, it will be further damage, definitely.
And so where are you living right now?
I'm in Henderson Heights at the moment.
Yeah, so are you having to stay with relatives, or are you renting while you're paying a mortgage?
We're renting. We're paying the mortgage, and we are renting as well. We have no family here, so we're in a very tough situation.
How much pressure is that putting on you?
Too much, and I can't tell you how the anxiety kicks in every time it rains. I mean, it's really hard. I've just got a 1.5-year-old baby. Both of us, even if we do full-time jobs, it's not relevant enough to go through, and it's just the anxiety, financial pressure is just too much.
And
the waiting game and the mental health is it's just through the roof as well.
So, did you go out and visit your property this afternoon, your home?
Yes, I did. And I thought it wouldn't be too bad, but it was pretty bad. So, yeah. The water was about half a metre in the garage outside, and obviously the driveway was flooded. And, we've just seen this again and again. It's just miserable.
Have you settled any of this with your insurance since it was damaged in the other weather events?
Not yet. So we're still in the waiting process. We are still being told that they're assessing the house. No one's actually come in, and our they haven't even assessed the house yet, and the content hasn't been paid either. We're just in the limbo land like everybody else.
Amrita, did you see any of your neighbours when you were out there today?
Yes, of course. They were all there. The kids were picked up, and we're just waiting to see. And I saw cars packed up, facing the road, because who knows how this weather is going to turn up to be.
So everybody ready just to get in their vehicles and go again?
Exactly, and bags are packed again, and it's just sad to see. At least I wasn't there, so I couldn't relive that. But looking at these neighbours, they're just as families. They're just human beings, want to live a normal life, and we can't anymore, because every time it rains, it's just terrible. It just brings the trauma again, and brings all the anxiety back to what it was, 3 months ago.
Amrita, do you think that the people who are making the decisions about retreat and rebuild, the authorities, that they understand the kind of mental trauma that you are describing, you experiencing?
I don't think so, because if there was, we would have seen a little bit better leadership. And I think 3 months now, all we're hearing is we're just hearing reports coming out, and no action's been taken. We can't see any actions. Forget about even the insurance. There's no one's come to see in our house. Our, the house was pretty wet inside, obviously, and no jibs still there. It's all black mold growing now, so it's probably just done further damage. The more we wait, there hasn't been any communication from the government either. Forget about the council, because they just washed their hands off.
I'm really sorry for what you are experiencing at the moment. I'm thanking you so much for joining us to tell your story tonight. That is Amrita Ojla, whose house was inundated in the anniversary weekend floods. She's been out there again today and says there is significant water back through the property again, and she hasn't even had the insurance claim from the first event settled. It is 5:30. Kia mau tonu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. It's time to go to the business news now. Ko taku hoa I Naianei, ko Kim Moody. Kim, the government finances are in worse shape than expected ahead of the budget next week. Do tell us more.
Kia ora, Lisa. Yes, so Treasury put out some figures today, some big numbers. So they showed a deficit of $3.4 billion for the 9 months ended March. Now that's about $2.5 billion higher than forecast. Tax revenue was below forecast as well, so $2.3 billion below forecast on the back of reduced income, corporate tax and GST revenue. Expenses were above forecast, however. That reflected the extra spending we've seen after the wake of recent storms, Auckland anniversaries, weather event, Cyclone Gabrielle. Today's weather event, the damage associated with that will push those costs up higher as well. So the half-year budget update forecast a full-year deficit of $3.6 billion. That's a lot of numbers. What basically it is saying in simpler terms is that the economy is performing weaker than was expected right about now. It's pointing to the fact that corporate tax and individual tax take was lower than Treasury expected. Whether that reflects a slowdown in spending, that's for economists and people, much smarter than me to say. But looking at this ahead of budget next week, which comes up next Thursday, it is quite interesting to put into context. So Finance Minister Grant Robertson will be delivering that. Our Prime Minister Chris Hipkins has called this a no-frills budget, perhaps reflecting what people are living with. A lot of people are living with no-frills supermarket budgets. I know I am at least. So Grant Robertson today came out and said, look, what we're seeing is reflecting kind of what we expected to see with a bit of a slowing economy. Robertson said New Zealand is still well placed to manage these economic challenges, which include, there's a long list of them now, cost of living pressures, the impact of flooding, cyclones, again today's event, uncertain global economy. So he said, he did say though, the upcoming budget would be, it required some tough choices on behalf of the government. They're having to respond to the economic slowdown that we are seeing. A lot of people are struggling to afford the cost of living. Inflation's at near record highs. So they said there were some tough choices there. So all will be revealed next Thursday.
Yeah, we wait with excitement. Now, tell us about the tourism sector. It's seeing mixed fortunes.
Yeah, some interesting things out of the tourism sector today. First of all, we had an update from Tourism Holdings, so that's a big campervan and tourism operator. They said their advanced bookings for the high season, they're seeing a lot of international interest, not so much from the domestic side. They said they're remaining positive heading into the next financial year. They're hoping that international travel will get back to those pre-COVID levels. That's back in 2019 for comparison. But recovery from China and from Chinese tourists is expected to take a bit longer. On that, we have the country's largest tourism business event happening right now in Christchurch, Trends. So there's a bit of talk about that as well. We had Christchurch Airport chatting today, not the airport, we had the airport's General Manager for Trade and Development, Scott Calloway, talking about this. He said, look, the pandemic recovery, it is mixed. North American travellers coming back to the party, the party being New Zealand right now, but China is a bit slower to return. Of course, China is our second largest visitor base behind our friends in Australia. They're big spenders when they come here as well, so the tourism sector does well when Chinese visitors do return. And he said, look, we knew it would be a bumpy ride, the recovery after COVID-19. There's a lot of pent-up demand, but, global uncertainties are making that a bit hard, so it is taking a bit of time. Also interesting that the industry had a survey come out today showing that more than half of tourism operators in New Zealand are still actively hiring for staff. That's despite our peak season being over. It's actually better than it was. At the end of last year, 75% of tourism operators were hiring, and they're saying demand is looking strong. So depending where you are and where you're trying to go, there is demand. It's just a little bit patchy right now.
Kim, shall we take a twirl through the markets?
Yes, let's. So the NZX Top 50 index is ending down 0.4%, or about 53 points, to 11,890. So our dollar actually hit a one-month high against the US today. It touched 63.585 dollars and cents. It's now sitting around it touched 63.585 cents rather. It's now sitting at 63.4 US cents. Australian, we're buying 93.4 cents and 50 pence.
Thank you, Kim. That is Kim Moody with our business update there. We are back here again, Auckland. The words of Met Service meteorologist Georgina Griffiths as she started her briefing to the city this afternoon. Indeed, Auckland has had 90% of its annual rainfall in the first third of the year, and still more is on the way. Well, Georgina joins us now with the latest. What should we expect over the next few hours, Georgina?
Well, there's good news for Aucklanders. What a rough day it was. We've actually just lifted a lot of the severe warnings we have for Auckland. We've lifted the severe thunderstorm watch, and we are on track to lift the heavy rain warning, which is a broad scale one, in the next hour or so. So the back edge of the rainfall is nearly through Auckland, and the risk of those really high intensity downpours has reduced.
So where is it headed, Georgina, or is it just petered out?
So it's moved through Northland, Auckland, and it's still affecting the Bay of Plenty. Of course, they have a severe thunderstorm warning in force still down there. That line is still very active there. Torrential rain, 40 to 50 millimetres an hour underneath that one. So just because Northland, Auckland have lost the risk of these high-intensity flood-inducing rainfall rates, other parts of the country, such as the Bay of Plenty, have not yet. So it's a rough night for the Bay of Plenty. and Coromandel nearly clear too.
Can you put that rainfall into perspective for us, please? How heavy is that?
Oh, I mean, look, heavy rain is 6 millimetres an hour or more, Lisa, and downpour 25 millimetres an hour or more always makes a mess when you get into those large numbers. Today we've seen 40 to 50 millimetres an hour at places like Whangārei Bay, Albany, Orewa, that type of North Auckland. We had 100 millimetres of rainfall fall in about 6 hours in around Warkworth, Wellsford, up in Albany, the north, Orewa area. Also out west, Henderson Valley, around the Waitakares. Hunua and Waiheke also got a real burst of high intensities too. But everywhere in Auckland, Lisa, saw 30 to 35 millimetres in an hour or less today, and it made a big mess. We were super saturated, nice and soggy. Everything just instantaneously runs off. That's why most people in the region saw floodwaters today, because that just quick runoff causing surface flooding very, very fast.
So tell me, Georgina, what's changed in the last little while? Because we were anticipating some heavy rainfalls through to 7 o'clock and told to keep our eyes peeled and be sharp until about midnight. So what's happened in the meantime?
The warning for severe thunderstorm watches and warnings were expected to push through for Auckland around 7 o'clock. In fact, I had 5 p.m. as my clearance time for those western coastline impacted areas, vulnerable, Muriwai, Piha, Karikari. That timing's played out quite well. It's just gone through a wee bit quicker, and we're grateful for that, aren't we? It's an hour or so early.
Yeah, we're grateful. The people down the line may not be. So what's coming over the next couple of days? Is there sunshine ever again in Auckland?
Well, we have good news on the horizon. Overnight, it's a lighter, showerier regime overnight, and no impacts are expected once the back edge is through Auckland. So we're just remembering Hunua's and Clevedon are still pouring at the moment. So once the rain has stopped at your place tonight, that's it for a little while. We do expect a burst of rain again through with a cold front tomorrow morning. It's a fast one, and it's not to the intensities we saw today. It's all about intensities at the moment. Then we're in passing showers and windy as anything, and a very cold change goes through. And we go back to good old-fashioned Auckland spring type southwesterlies with mobile showers that get you wet every 5 minutes but are not likely to be impactful. So that's the next few days. We also have a good weekend and a high coming, and I have to say, when did we last see a 5 or 6 day high? Wow, I'm super excited. So is my team. The forecast room have had a rough year. So is Auckland, where we actually see some fine and dry weather come, and we may even see that thing in the sky we haven't seen for a while, Lisa.
Oh, the big sun. Can't wait, Georgina. Thank you so much for the update. That is Georgina Griffiths, who's she's a Met Service meteorologist there. So easing off in Auckland, but moving down the island to the Bay of Plenty. Severe thunderstorm warning in place there, and 30 mils plus an hour of heavy rain going in their direction. It is 20 to 6, and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Do keep us up to date with what's going on in your area. If you're in the Bay of Plenty and it's starting to hit you, do let us know. Where are you? How bad is it? 2101 on text. Tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. The email address, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Also interested in the Coromandel too. Should be passing over you shortly. It is time to go to the headlines. Ko Evi Anō tēnei.
The Whangārei Mayor says Abbey caves, where a student is missing, are regularly checked by District Council staff. Search and rescue teams have suspended the search for the Year 11 student from Whangārei Boys High School after his outdoor education class got into trouble in bad weather this morning. The Mayor, Vince Kokorulo, told Checkpoint there are risks involved with caving and there are notices about the dangers of venturing into the caves. He says he doesn't believe anything similar has happened at the caves before. Auckland Councillor Shane Henderson says the library in Te Manawa in Westgate is now open as a shelter for people displaced from their homes by the heavy rain in the Auckland region today. Mr Henderson says some people had already been flooded, but it was a waiting game to see how extensive the damage is. Met Service has issued a severe thunderstorm warning for the Bay of Plenty and Coromandel this evening, but lifted many of the warnings for Auckland. Georgina Griffiths told Checkpoint a warning is in place for Western Bay of Plenty, Tauranga, Whakatane and Rotorua until just after 6 o'clock this evening, and for Great Barrier Island and Coromandel Peninsula until after 7 o'clock. And in news just to hand, a group of lawyers is taking the Minister for Climate Change, James Shaw, to court over a cabinet decision about the emissions trading scheme. The Lawyers for Climate Action have filed for a judicial review in the High Court. It argues the scheme's current settings aren't consistent with New Zealand's emissions reduction targets. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic in Northland, State Highway 10, Kaio to Mangonui, the roads closed between Omaunu and Whangārei roads because of flooding. State Highway 16, Kaukapakapa to Wellsford, a fallen tree is blocking the road northbound near the Bar Road intersection. State Highway 14, Maungatapere to Dargaville, there are reports of serious flooding east of Bob Taylor Road. In Auckland, a lot of surface flooding. Don't travel if you don't have to. State Highway 2 south of Waihi, the road is closed because of flooding near Kelly Road. A strong wind warning is currently in place for the Desert Road, State Highway 1 between Waiuru and Rangipo. And in the South Island, road snowfall warnings are in place for Arthurs and Lewis passes. That's State Highway 73 and 7 until 11 o'clock tomorrow evening. Our next news and weather is at 6 o'clock.
Thank you, Evie. Let's go to other news now. Ex-Minister Meka Whaitiri has made a dramatic parliamentary debut as an independent MP, her first time coming face-to-face with her former Labour colleagues. Her entrance saw the leaders of Te Pāti Māori booted from the debating chamber for conducting a pōwhiri without permission. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Craig McCulloch.
The return of a renegade, Meka Whaitiri, back at Parliament for the first time since quitting Labour, and her first act, one of rebellion. The former minister entered the House alongside Te Pāti Māori's co-leader Rawiri Waititi this afternoon in an unsanctioned pōwhiri. The Speaker, Adrian Rudafere, unimpressed.
Rawiri Waititi will leave the chamber, and Debbie Peka Ngārewa Peka will leave the chamber as well.
The rejection left Meka Whaitiri alone, seated in Te Pāti Māori's spot, freed from Labour's supposed shackles. She told MPs the reason for her resignation was a personal one. It was time to listen to her whakapapa.
The calling that comes deep from within my puku.
For the first time, she felt unencumbered, she said, free to speak her truth as a wahine Māori without compromise. Before, she felt unheard in Labour. Now, she feels liberated.
I have joined a party that enables the voice of wahine Māori to be heard and not censored in this House.
But Te Pāti Māori's co-leaders say they were censored today, their tikanga trampled on. Rawiri Waititi says he sought permission from all other parties to hold the welcoming ceremony, and no one objected. It was only later, he said, that some changed their mind.
We've been punished for doing our jobs and for ensuring that Meka had a safe transition over in the House.
Labour's caucus spent the day in damage control, the Prime Minister pushing back against any suggestion his Māori MPs lack a voice.
So I'm disappointed she feels that way. I mean, ultimately that's her call.
And Labour's Māori caucus have rallied behind him, claiming Ms Whaitiri was listened to in Labour, as are they.
I'm surprised to hear that, but, that's her.
No, I don't think that's fair at all.
Well, Meka Whaitiri was an Associate Minister in the Labour caucus, and if you're representing at that level, you are heard.
I do feel very much hurt in our team and in our caucus.
I think those are the sorts of excuses that come up when you don't have a real excuse.
For Labour and the left, the defection risks creating a narrative of instability, not aided by the resignation of Green MP Elizabeth Kerekere on Friday. She too returned to Parliament as an independent today, but did not speak to media. Te Pāti Māori and Meka Whaitiri offering something of an olive branch.
And to actually welcome her to the independent Tairāwhiti political party may have been a bit too soon.
The right-wing opposition parties, meanwhile, are relishing the spectacle. The National Party pushed out an attack ad last night, a series of news clips and the question, can you afford 3 more years?
The Labour Party has been thrown into turmoil.
Mika Whaitiri's departure means Hawke's Bay has now lost its second cyclone recovery minister in as many months.
National would do well, though, to remember its own turbulent times, a messy leadership change only a year and a half ago. National's Deputy Nicola Willis says that's precisely why they can criticise it.
We've put that chapter behind us. I think one of the marks of Chris's leadership is that he's united our team. So when we look over the other side and we see what they're going through now, we know what a mighty distraction it really is.
They clearly haven't looked in the mirror very much lately. Obviously, I'd prefer that this didn't happen, but this is still a very stable and functioning government.
With 62 MPs, Labour still holds a majority at Parliament, though they began the term numbering 65. Its remaining Māori MPs say they've no intention of also jumping ship, and Chris Hipkins better hope that's the case. That majority is looking slimmer by the day.
Sticking with politics, in a grab for rural votes, ACT standing former Federated Farmers President Andrew Hoggard in the normally blue seat of Rangatike. Mr Hoggard, a Manawatu farmer, quit the presidency early to end speculation about his next move. And the newly minted ACT candidate joins us now. Kia ora, Andrew.
Good afternoon, Lisa.
You pretty excited?
Yeah, I am actually. It's been a long time in Feds, so it's a bit of a change for me actually. I've kind of gotten old in Federated Farmers, so it's good to do something new.
I thought that the National Party was the party of farmers, isn't it?
Farmers have free will. They can choose where they vote, and I don't think anyone owns their votes. We've got to earn them. And so for me, when I've looked at ACT, it was a party that, I saw the philosophies and the principles that I agreed with and I like represented in ACT, and that's seemed like a natural home for me.
So why wasn't National a natural home for you?
I guess when I made this call, it was, I just was really impressed with what David was doing at the time. And this was back in 2019. And, he was standing firm on his principles. And, it wasn't that I have anything against National. It was just this feels more like a home for me.
Did they come calling for you or did you go to them?
No, well, I joined the party. I didn't make a fuss about it or anything like that.
When did you join up, Andrew?
2019. And, David spotted that I had joined and had a few chats over the years. And, yes, he said, if you're keen. And earlier this year, I thought, I am keen, actually.
OK, so when did you seal the deal to stand in Rangatike?
So I filled in the candidate application forms back in early February, and actually, in terms of sealing the deal, I think it was, last week they said they'd like to put me in Rangatike as a candidate. But, the announcement wasn't supposed to be for a while yet, and I was busy trying to dry cows off last night, and the phone started buzzing, and they wanted to make the call today, so here we are.
Hey, so that seat has basically been blue since about 1938. I think a couple of times it dropped out to another party, but pretty much blue all the way. I mean, how do you fancy your chances? Why do you think you can win it?
I don't actually think we're going for the party vote. I'm not going for the electorate vote.
Right, so you can't win. You're saying that now. Lost cause.
I don't know. I could give it a crack. I've been around here for a while. Lots of people know me, but no, our plan is to go for the party vote, not the electorate vote.
OK, so the party vote's the priority. What's your ranking going to be on the list?
I have no idea yet. I believe the board makes that decision, the ACT Party board makes that decision in mid-July. They have said that based on current polling, I should hopefully get there, but I'm not someone that likes to count my chickens until they've hatched.
No, I know what you mean about that, but you're not going there to, play tiddlywinks, are you? You're probably wanting to be pretty much guaranteed you're going to get in. You've given up a good job. So have they pretty much told you you're going to be high up on the list?
They've said I'll get an electable spot, is what I heard. What that means, I don't know. And, I'll be waiting with bated breath to know what my list ranking is.
OK. So what are you promising farmers if you get elected?
I guess more of the same of what I've been doing over the years, and that's representing them and their concerns.
So what does that mean? No paying for agricultural emissions?
Well, the ACT Party policy is that ag emissions don't go into the ETS, and any pricing scheme would be based on what our top 5 trading partners are doing, so we would do likewise to them. And I mean, for me, it's, there's been a hell of a rush of legislation and regulation in the last 5 years that has just overwhelmed farmers, and a lot of it has been pretty poorly worded, and a lot of it's going through its 3rd or 4th attempt to make it workable. And my view my desire would be to, slow this down, get it right. The intent is often the right intent, but the practicality is lacking.
Okay, looking at your timeline, right? At Federated Farmers, you were working on He Waka Eka Noa, right? You were consulting and in good faith, one assumes, but you had signed up to the ACT Party in 2019 and you'd been having discussions earlier this year about being a candidate. Was it really in good faith that you were consulting on He Waka Eka Noa, or had you already made your mind up?
Well, no, it was the organisation was consulting, and as part of that, it doesn't mean that everyone in the organisation has to be have no political allegiance or in any of the organisations. I mean, I just challenge if people want to think I haven't acted in good faith, look back over the numerous interviews I've done over the last couple of years, and when credit's been due, I've given credit, and when it hasn't, I haven't. I've tried to be as fair and balanced as I possibly can in the role.
Appreciate your time, Andrew. That's Andrew Hoggard, who is standing for ACT and as a candidate in Rangitikei, although he said he can't win. He's after the party vote. It is 8 minutes to 6. West Auckland residents are dealing with yet another severe event, with some residents forced to leave their homes again because of flooding. Our reporter Louise Tanuth is there and joins us now. Louise, you've been talking to some locals. What are they saying?
That's right, Lisa. Frustrations are high here in West Auckland for residents having to do this yet again. Some of them are out of their homes for a couple, sort of the 3rd time this year for some of these residents. And so they're really frustrated that they're having to do this again. Earlier we were at Dombuck Road, where the Dombuck Road Bridge has already been overflowing with water from that stream there up onto the road. It's a huge safety concern for residents. And a lot of those residents on Dombuck Road are already out of their houses, living in temporary accommodation. But they gathered there today to air their concerns to Minister Wood about that bridge, which they say is highly responsible for some of that first initial flooding way back in January, at the January anniversary floods there. And one of those residents spoke to me, Neva, who's living in temporary accommodation with her family of 10, and she told me that they've lost their freedom to the floods.
So our house is pretty much, not in a stable condition or a stage to come back to. And we're not planning on coming back here. Hopefully we'll get some answers soon. Because of the hotel that we're at, it's not really a big space for us to take all our stuff. So we had cleaned out the garage, and we had some stuff in there. And this afternoon, that's all gone. And there is 10 of us staying in a 3-bedroom house, which is not a good thing for our little ones. And this is the 3rd time that it happened. So we're in the position where we don't want to come back here. Hopefully some miracle will happen and something comes up. Because it's really hard to find out accommodation right now, even with the prices, and especially we're a big family. I don't think anyone would want to rent out their property for a big family. So it's just our freedom is gone. We just want something sorted.
And Louise, you've been looking around some houses. How do they look?
That's right. So the houses that we were looking at today were particularly hard hit here in West Auckland, particularly on Dombuck Road, where, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of those residents are no longer living in those houses because they were so badly hit last time. But those flood levels have come in just pretty much on par with the Auckland anniversary floods back in January. And those levels were extremely high, so flood levels have come back through houses that were already dilapidated and flooded through. So again, things are just sodden and everything is back to square one for some of these residents that are trying to pick up the pieces.
Thanks for the update, Louise. That is Louise Danuth joining us live from West Auckland. It is 5 minutes to 6. Kia amo tōne mai. Stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Secondary teachers across the South Island walked off the job today, calling for salary increases that match inflation. It's the first of 3 regional strikes across the country planned for this week. Our reporter, Anna Sargent, was at one of the protests near Christchurch's central city. OK, we've got a little problem with that audio. We'll come back to that package at another point. Let's go to that package now.
Drivers honked and called out in support for the teachers standing with signs by Christchurch's intersection near Hagley Park. Teacher Rosa Hughes-Curry, who is also a regional representative for the Post-Primary Teachers Association, says she would rather be in the classroom today.
I'm a physics teacher at Hagley College. I really don't want to be on strike today, actually. I love teaching, I love my job, but I'm thinking about starting a family and I just don't think that I can do it on the current wages that we have. Like the price of food and of rent and mortgages just keeps going up, and we're just asking for pay that matches inflation.
Simon Brower is a secondary school teacher in Riccarton and says teachers are frustrated by the lack of progress with negotiations.
We're here because we want to have some visibility for the issues with education. We're pretty sick and tired of these negotiations. They're really falling short of where things need to be at.
Harrison McAvoy is a student teacher in Christchurch and says his placement experience has been eye-opening.
I've been on my placement and what I've seen is just a group of really resilient and strong teachers that are not getting the support they need from the system, that there's not enough pay, there's not enough resources, there's never enough time. So I can spend easily up to 3 hours a night just prepping for the next day, and I only have 2 classes to prep for.
But he doesn't believe students who are passionate about the work will be deterred. The Secondary Teachers Union received a new pay offer for settlement from the Education Ministry last night, but they say it still isn't good enough. The union's acting president, Chris Abercrombie, says teachers need a pay increase that matches the cost of living, and the offer on the table doesn't do that. He says there's a chronic shortage of teachers.
We've got a number of positions that aren't being filled. We've a number of advertisements not being answered, and increasingly the likelihood of having a specialist teacher in front of a student in secondary school is decreasing, and that's not good enough, and that's what we're fighting against.
The union's annual staffing survey released last week found that a third of all advertised teachers' positions couldn't be filled. The Education Minister, Jan Tinetti, says she's surprised strike action is continuing this week when there is a facilitated bargaining process in place. She says her intention and expectation is that negotiations are settled quickly.
I want to see money in the pockets of our teachers. We really need to support our teachers in what's a difficult time, and that's exactly what these negotiations are about.
Chris Abercrombie says the PPTA's National Executive will consider the Ministry of Education's offer for settlement later this week, but at this stage, rolling strikes will continue. Tomorrow, the strike will cover area and secondary schools in the North Island up to Taranaki and Hawke's Bay, before moving to the rest of the North Island on Thursday.
If you're just joining us, obviously Auckland is in a state of emergency. The Mayor Wayne Brown is out of town in Sydney. He's delegated his powers to the Deputy Desley Simpson. We talked to her earlier in the programme, and some of you got back to us on that interview. This person says, Desley Simpson for Mayor, she rocks. And another says, could the Auckland Mayor please delegate all his powers to his deputy permanently? She beats him hands down. Always, you say. And lots of reports from you about traffic being absolutely backed up in the city centre, practically gridlocked Queen Street and other feeder streets, and waiting for buses taking a long time.
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Ngā mihi o te pō. Good evening. I'm Evie Ashton. The worst weather appears to be over for Auckland, which remains under a local state of emergency after a day of torrential rain. Most areas across the region were hit by rainfall of up to 35 millimetres an hour, causing flooding across some roads and creating gridlock on main routes. Auckland Emergency Management says there'll be 6 civil defence and community shelters open for anyone needing shelter overnight. Widespread flooding resulted in 277 weather-related call-outs by 3 3 o'clock today, most from Auckland. Hundreds of commuters were stranded for hours waiting for public transport after many buses, trains and ferries were cancelled or delayed. Met Service has lifted the severe thunderstorm watch for Auckland and says it's on track to lift the heavy rain warning in the next hour. Meteorologist Georgina Griffiths says the back edge of the rainfall is nearly through Auckland and the risk of the high-intensity downpours has reduced. She says a severe thunderstorm warning is still in force for the Bay of Plenty.
They have a severe thunderstorm warning in force still down there. That line is still very active there. Torrential rain, 40 to 50 millimetres an hour underneath that one. So just because Northland, Auckland have, lost the risk of these high-intensity flood-inducing rainfall rates, other parts of the country, such as the Bay of Plenty, have not yet.
Georgina Griffiths says it will be a rough night for the Bay of Plenty. The search for a student missing after a caving expedition near Whangārei has been suspended for the night. The Whangārei Boys High School student was part of a group of fellow students rescued from the Abbey caves after torrential rain hit this morning. An experienced caver says based on today's weather forecast, he wouldn't have entered the caves today. Peter Crossley, who did the original survey of the caves, told Checkpoint the water rises very quickly during a storm. He says normally the cave has some water in it.
No big deal. You get wet, it's quite pleasant. But in this sort of rain, you wouldn't catch me in there. Definitely not.
In a statement, school principal Karen Gilbert-Smith says a full and comprehensive investigation into the trip will occur. But Ms Gilbert-Smith says for now, the school community is focusing on supporting one another. Returning to Auckland, a woman whose West Auckland house was inundated in the January floods says today's torrential rain has traumatised her once again. Amrita Ojala's home was yellow-stickered in January and she and her family haven't been able to live there since. Today, water has risen half a metre into her garage and she's worried about her house flooding again. She told Checkpoint the stress is getting too much.
It's really hard. I've just got a 1.5-year-old baby. Both of us, even if we do full-time jobs, it's not relevant enough to, go through, and it's just the anxiety, financial pressure is just too much.
Amrita Ojala says she's still waiting to hear from her insurance company about the January flood. Several domestic flights have been cancelled out of Auckland, but disruption isn't at the same level the city faced during its anniversary weekend. 10 Air New Zealand flights in and out of the airport have been axed, while there are also delays to other services. Air New Zealand is warning passengers if flights can't land, then their planes will go back to where they flew from. The head of Civil Defence on the Coromandel Peninsula says he's expecting several hours of intense rain before the front passes through. The region has now surpassed its normal annual rainfall, with 3.5 metres of rain falling since the beginning of the year. Gary Towler told Checkpoint conditions aren't severe, but the weather is being closely monitored.
We've got multiple slips right across our local roads and our state highways. Some of them are small, some of them are just a few rocks, but the driving is the issue now, as well, of course, as our ongoing land instability.
Gary Towler says about 40 millimetres of rain an hour is falling, which they can cope with. In other news, Te Pāti Māori is adamant it's done nothing wrong after getting ejected from the House for performing a whakawātea in the debating chamber. The Speaker asked both co-leaders to leave the chamber this afternoon after they performed a traditional song for former Labour Minister Mika Whaitiri. Speaking afterwards, Debbie Ngarewa-Packer says politics has superseded tikanga.
I think the Speaker's done everything that he should have done and could have done, and it's not his fault that others have changed their minds. He did, clarify the absolute truth. We did go and seek permission. Yes. We got advice that they were okay, and things had changed. Obviously, politics supersede tikanga.
The Speaker, Adrian Dudafe, says Te Pāti Māori had given him assurances other parties had agreed to the whakawātea, something he was later told wasn't true. And overseas, Ukraine claims its air defences have repelled a fresh wave of missiles from Russia as Moscow prepares to mark its 1945 Victory Day. In New York, a court has heard the closing arguments in a civil trial in which the former US President Donald Trump is accused of raping and later defaming a writer, E. Jean Carroll. And tens of thousands of people have joined a protest in the Serbian capital Belgrade after 2 mass shootings in the country last week. That's the news. Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Wednesday. Severe thunderstorm warnings are in place for the Western Bay of Plenty, Tauranga, Whakatane and Rotorua until just after 6 this evening, and for Aotea, Great Barrier Island and Coromandel Peninsula until after 7 p.m. Northland to Kapiti, including Bay of Plenty and the Central High Country, rain or showers, some heavy and possibly thundery thunderstorms and localised downpours spreading east this evening and easing for a time from the west tonight and early tomorrow morning. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay mainly fine, but showers about the ranges, some heavy. Wellington and Waded Upper, scattered rain easing to isolated showers tonight. Bulla, Northern Westland, Nelson and Marlborough, heavy rain or showers with possible thunderstorms in the west, turning to showers in the east this evening, showers becoming isolated tomorrow. Fiordland and Southern Westland, showers with heavy thundery falls, easing from tonight. Canterbury, mostly cloudy with scattered showers. Otago and Southland, periods of rain. Snow lowering to 400 metres tomorrow evening. And for Te Kohu, Chatham Islands, a few showers today. Rain, then showers tomorrow. It's coming up to 7 minutes past 6. I'll have news headlines for you at 6:30.
Kia ora rā iho. Sticking with the theme of bad weather in traffic, some of you getting in touch via feedback. This person says, traffic into Tauranga on State Highway 29 is backed up to the Waikato side of the Kaimais. Whoa. I left Devonport at 11 a.m. and now stopped dead after 6 hours and 45 minutes. Hope everyone is safe, they say. Me too. Wow, that's a hell of a long journey. We've spoken to people who are still involved with getting their insurance claims settled for previous flood damage, and again, they're being hit today. This listener from Christchurch has got in touch to say, my experience with insurance companies after the Christchurch earthquake is be your own advocate. Make it your job to call and email daily. Please advise your listeners in this situation, make it your second job. No one will help. I can't stress this enough. It took me 3.5 years to resolve. Thank you for your feedback, 2101 on text. And you're listening to Checkpoint. If you are just joining us, welcome to this special. As severe weather continues to hit parts of the country tonight. In Whangārei, police have announced they've suspended the search for a Whangārei Boys High School student still unaccounted for after a school excursion to nearby Abbey caves. 17 people were on the trip, including a teacher, a guide and 15 Year 11 students on an outdoor education trip. Our reporter Tom Taylor is in Whangārei. Tom, what is the school saying about this trip?
Hi, Lisa. Yeah, in a statement this afternoon, a couple of hours ago, the principal of Whangārei Boys, Karen Gilbert-Smith, said that the group encountered a severe weather event while they were on a trip to the nearby Abbey Caves. One of these students is sadly still missing. Ms. Gilbert-Smith says the events of today were hugely upsetting for all involved and for the wider school community. She says that in time they will be seeking to understand exactly what happened here with presumably an investigation into that. But for now, they're focused just on supporting students, whānau and staff. With that in mind, the school will be reopening tomorrow, and they're hoping that just provides a kind of sense of routine and normality for the Whangārei Boys students.
Yeah, so this was a Year 11 trip, meaning that the students who were on it were 15 or 16 years old. Also, Tom, I'm wondering what the weather is like there at the moment and when police are saying they'll get back to searching.
Well, as for the police getting back to searching, they're saying that will happen at first light. So I've just left the cordon down by the entrance to the caves there, where police will be remaining there overnight to keep that cordon in place. But they did say that they'll be resuming that at first light and don't want anyone to presume anything has happened at this point while the investigation is still underway there. As for the weather here in Whangārei, it's actually quite weirdly calm. Just out on the street here, and it's suddenly gotten quiet. It's a pretty different situation to what we had here a couple of hours ago and the really pounding rain. There is still an orange heavy rain warning in place for Northland until 7 o'clock tonight, but it's looking like the weather is clearing here. There's a few black clouds from what I can see in the dimming lights, but I think those are meant to be clearing up in the next hour or so.
Thank you for the update, Tom. That is Tom Taylor in Whangārei, where police say they'll resume that search for the student who remains missing at the Abbey Caves tomorrow morning. Meanwhile, further south here in Auckland, Mayor Wayne Brown, who was in Sydney today, has declared a state of emergency following severe flash flooding. Torrential rain forced several Auckland schools, a museum and zoo to close early and has put already traumatised and displaced residents on edge again. Fire and Emergency told us earlier in the programme it has dealt with almost 300 weather-related incidents across Northland and Auckland, and most of them were between midday and 1 p.m. this afternoon. Deputy Mayor Desley Simpson, who is in charge in Wayne Brown's absence, told Checkpoint there were no mandatory evacuations, but some residents in suburbs of West Auckland, Albany and Westgate had chosen to leave their homes. Some of those residents have told us they feel traumatised leaving their homes to escape floodwaters for the third time this year. The city was in gridlock for most of the afternoon as parents were urged to pick up their children early from school and workers were told to go home. It brought the city to a standstill and caused chaos for public transport. Auckland Transport is warning commuters still heading home to expect significant delays. It says additional bus services express from Newmarket to Otahuhu have been dispatched, and buses 774, 775, TMK are now able to get through on Tamaki Drive. The Western Line and Southern Train lines have also resumed at a reduced frequency and reduced speed. The Eastern Line is still running between Manukau and Otahuhu. Debris in the water means ferries between Auckland and Birkenhead have been replaced with alternative transport. Auckland Councillor Richard Hills has been on social media calling for better communication from Auckland Transport earlier in the day, and he joins us now. Kia ora, Richard. How would you describe the commuter experience this afternoon for most people?
It was not good at all for most people. I decided whether I'd stay in the office or head back to the shore to check on the shore, and I jumped on the bus, or tried to, and I think my journey was about 2.5 hours in total, and I know many people were for much longer than that.
How long would that normally take you, Richard?
My bus is actually quite good. It's about 30 minutes all up to home, so don't tell most people that because they'll be quite jealous of that trip to the shore. But yeah, usually because it's on bus lanes, I'm there home pretty fast. So today was about, 4 or 5 times that.
So, do you think the explanation given by Auckland Transport for the delays is acceptable? Or should we be able to do better when the weather turns bad?
We definitely should be able to do better. There are obviously reasons why it had a domino effect, and I was kind of giving those caveats when my tweets was, demanding more buses. I was sending photos of the long lines of people standing in the rain, and I do understand that with the traffic snarl-ups everywhere and motorway closures, that some of the buses were finding it hard to get back to the city, and so that's okay. But I think just, sort of seeing that tap turn on, having a bunch of drivers who are keen to jump back on the network and get to the city, or at least, putting out, I was trying to put out maybe go back to the office and wait, but I didn't have a clue of exactly when buses and trains might come back. Britomart was closed, but it wasn't clearly communicated that they were trying to reopen it. I was worried that was it for the day, and I was thinking, goodness, how are people even going to get home?
Here's the thing, though. When the council declares a state of emergency, right, when the mayor does that and effectively instructs people to go home now before severe weather hits, do you not think that they should plan ahead to have the public transport in there to get people home before they order them home?
Yes, I think I'd started posting before the state of emergency, before those warnings to get back home. I sort of was just once again seeing what was happening. My son's daycare was asking everyone to come and pick up the kids because they were flooding and things. So I think everyone was just acting on what they were seeing, and then that state of emergency or that kind of more dramatic pick up your kids type thing came about an hour or so later. But yeah, in my opinion, if they could have got a few more buses out quickly, and also once again, there are places in the city that do not have full connected bus lanes, and I know it's not all about buses, but that can move dramatically more people out of the city and help clear the place and keep people safe quicker if they weren't blocked up with just general traffic. So 5 or 6 cars blocking 2 or 3 buses of 90 people, and those buses not being able to turn around quick enough to get back.
Seems we don't have much resilience when we have ferries that can't operate in the harbour because there might be debris from a severe weather event, and then we also have a situation where the trains can't run on the line because it's raining.
Yeah, it's pretty significant. So we are, the short-term issues is that communication and I was putting out stuff last night, and I know that Auckland Emergency Management was sort of warning people about travelling or maybe staying home. But I think the longer term, medium to longer term, with help from hopefully the government, we are going to have to dramatically change the way our city looks. And because every major city is having these issues with climate change and with flooding and more severe thunderstorms and rain, but I think obviously people's anxiety now when it rains is horrendous. But if we don't have those options for people, and I know the answers aren't easy, but we kind of need to get on that track of changing up the transport system or making it more resilient fairly quickly, and it's going to take a lot of money and time, unfortunately.
So, on a broader basis, how have you found the communication from Council this time round after, Council was given a pretty severe serve for their handling of the last emergency situation?
Far better. I had all the information I felt like I could give to my local residents and put it out across social media last night, and lots of people shared that. And I guess that the issue is we did the same last week and then nothing really happened. And I think people go, is it going to be terrible or is it not? And that's kind of this whole, needing to be prepared, very clear, very kind of alarming, but then also making sure that we're not frightening people if we don't have to. It's this really hard balance. So it's far better than it was, but I'm sure people will be saying in the moment that it wasn't good and people didn't know what to do and it was tough. So I think there's positives. We definitely knew what was going on, and there was a lot more catch pits being cleared and things being sorted and people being warned. But whether in the moment when the chaos kind of happens, I think people would probably argue that it wasn't clear again.
Thanks for your time, Richard. That's Richard Hills, an Auckland councillor there, just talking about, the commuter chaos that ensued in the bad weather. In breaking news, many of you have been getting in touch about the travel times to Tauranga over the Kaimai Ranges. You're telling us traffic is at a standstill. Waka Kotahi says State Highway 29 is closed due to a slip 200 metres past McLaren Falls Road, and State Highway 2 south of Waihi is also closed due to flooding. So it's a bit of a double whammy. Waka Kotahi is asking travellers to avoid the area, please. It is 18 minutes after 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. To other news now, and Russia has launched its biggest wave of drone attacks on Ukraine in months. 10 regions were targeted and at least 3 civilians have been killed. It follows a lull in Russian attacks on civilian targets in recent months, which saw the capital, Kiev, go days without an attack. Russia is stepping up its aerial attacks ahead of an expected offensive by Ukraine. Hugo Barshagar has more.
It was the 4th time in 8 days that Kyiv came under attack, and authorities say this building was hit by a debris that fell from a drone that was intercepted by air defense. Now, we heard the air raid alert here shortly before midnight, and the all clear came only 3.5 hours later.
We spoke to a resident in one of the affected homes.
What do you think is the Russian goal with these attacks, targeting places like Kyiv, away from the front line?
Their target is terrorize our civilian peoples because they can't fight on the field, and they try to terrorize.
Now, the Ukrainian military said Russia had fired 35 drones in this latest wave of attacks, those Iranian-made drones that Russia has been using to attack Ukrainian cities and towns, and that the Ukrainian military intercepted all those drones. Now, the region of Odessa also came under attack. A warehouse was hit in the south of the country, and in recent weeks, Russia has intensified these airstrikes, targeting places like Kyiv, away from the front lines. This happens as the Ukrainian authorities say they're finishing plans for a much anticipated counteroffensive to try to take back territory that's now under Russian occupation.
To the US now, and 3 children and a young engineer from India are among the victims of the mass shooting at a Texas mall. More details are being revealed about the victims after the attack that killed 8 people. Several injured people remain in hospital, and officials are looking into the killer's potential links to far-right organisations or beliefs. As CNN's Ed Lavandria reports, authorities are also learning the shooter had been removed from military service because of mental health concerns.
Minutes after gunfire erupted at the Outlet Mall in Allen, Texas,
Are you getting more ambulances on this event?
it was clear to first responders the scene was a mass casualty event.
We have multiple things.
The unit's down at the burger joint. Does that suspect have an AR rifle?
10-4. I need an ambulance at H&M. I've got victims.
After killing 8 people and wounding at least 7 others, Mauricio Garcia was killed by a police officer at the scene. A law enforcement source tells CNN the 33-year-old gunman served 3 months in the U.S. Army and did not complete basic training and was removed because of mental health concerns. Despite this, Texas state records show Garcia was approved to work as a commissioned security guard and even received firearms training. Witnesses say Garcia acted calmly as he carried out the attack.
He's kind of in a deliberate assault type move.
In 2019, Texas Governor Greg Abbott created a state domestic terrorism task force after the El Paso Walmart massacre, which would, quote, increase the detection and monitoring of domestic terrorism and other mass casualty threats, including neo-Nazi and white nationalist groups.
I want to know what DPS has been doing, what threads they've been following on Twitter or Facebook or any kind of social media from people like this man in Allen.
Texas DPS and Governor Abbott have not answered questions about the shooting investigation.
The people in Allen, but especially the families, they want to know right now why this happened, how it happened.
We're also learning the heartbreaking details of what happened to the Cho family. The family of 4 was at the mall together, but only 6-year-old William survived the shooting. His parents, Kyu-song and Shin-young, along with his 3-year-old brother, were all killed. William remains in the hospital and was just removed from the ICU. Other victims include Ashwarya Tatikonda, an engineer who lived in McKinney, Texas, and Christian Licor, a 20-year-old mall security guard.
I mean, he was the kindest and sweetest, most caring man you'd ever interact with.
While public officials struggle to cure an epidemic of mass shootings.
The first step to leading to some type of resolution here, as well as providing information about the response needed from the state of Texas, is to know exactly why and how this happened.
We've heard from this governor about mental illness and evil and everything else, and you need to know, and everybody in Texas needs to know, that's all bullshit. Every time something happens, it's something else, and he's got a solution for this that's not related to the common denominator, which is guns.
To the UK now, where there's been days of celebrations following the coronation of King Charles. Among the events, people across the country have been invited to volunteer with the Big Help Out. Members of the royal family have been dropping in on some of the projects underway. The BBC's Charlotte Gallagher has more.
About after 3. 1, 2, 3.
After the glitz and glamour of the coronation concert, today's celebrations come down to earth. Scouts and their volunteer leaders, just some of the thousands of people taking part in the Big Help Out. And a famous face is getting involved too.
It makes us all a better person when we get involved and we extend our network and we meet new people and we develop new friendships and we feel like we're doing something positive, and I love that.
Members of the royal family are at some of the events, including the Prince and Princess of Wales and their children. They've been in Slough helping the Scouts with a bit of building work, with Prince Louis keeping up with his older brother and getting behind the controls of a digger. Members of the royal family are at some of the events. The Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh have been meeting some guide dogs at a taster session for volunteers. While the Princess Royal is at Gloucester Cathedral for a service to thank people helping their communities.
So I can come and help out with the strawberries.
And the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, and his wife, Akshatar Murty, are being put to work in a kitchen in Hertfordshire. The big help out is about bringing people together, something the Prince of Wales said was incredibly important to his dad.
My father has always understood that people of all faiths, all backgrounds, and all communities deserve to be celebrated and supported.
Today marks the end of the Coronation Spectacular, where royalty, world leaders, superstars, and even Kermit came together to celebrate.
It is the Wales landmark that started out as a joke and lasted for 20 years. Now it's making a comeback. The billboard for Llandegli International became an amusing sight for motorists making their way through the hills of rural Wales. But now fans of the parody have got it back on the road, as the BBC's Sue Charles reports.
It started out as a joke and ended up being a mid-Wales landmark. In 2002, a sign appeared for a fictional airport, Llandegli International, on a main road in a very rural part of the country. The man behind it, Nicholas Whitehead, used to write comedy sketches for a well-known BBC radio programme and worked with the famous British comedy group Monty Python. He wanted to do something completely different himself and came up with this idea for rural Radnorshire, where there's barely even a dual carriageway, let alone demand for an international airport. The sign was treated as an advertising billboard and cost around £1,500 per year to maintain. After spending $25,000 over 20 years, Mr. Whitehead decided to stop funding it, but it proved so popular, a crowdfund campaign was launched to save it.
I thought in a time of austerity, no local authority will want to pay for this themselves, so I thought we'll solve that problem for them and raise all the money. In the end, we only needed £1,300 and we raised £2,000 on a crowdfunder.
Now the sign's been put back up on farmland near the village, where it can stay permanently. The airport's taken off on social media, with thousands of followers enjoying updates about Llandegli's impressive environmental credentials. With a new sign in place and a growing fan club, Llandegli International is on the road again, but not open for business.
Now, before we go, there is a thunderstorm watch and heavy rain falling across the Coromandel and the Bay of Plenty. Waka Kotahi says State Highway 29 is closed due to a slip 200 metres past McLaren Falls Road. And State Highway 2 south of Waihi is also closed due to flooding. Waka Kotahi is asking travellers to avoid the area. There are also reports Lake Rotorua Canal breaching, flooding homes across several streets. In Auckland, there are 2 civil defence centres open if you need them. Now, one is at 11 Kohuhu Lane in Westgate, Kohuhu Lane, number 11 in Westgate, and another is at the Albany Community Hub. That's 575 Albany Highway if you need to get out of your home. There are also community emergency hubs open with food and bedding, and they're in Commuter, Warkworth, Wellsford, Devonport, Beachlands and Pukekohe. Now, the weather is causing havoc on some of our roads, so before we go, a couple of pointers here. State Highway 1, Brynderwyns to Waipu, remains closed overnight and will be reassessed in the morning. That from Waka Kotahi. Also, State Highway 1, Dome Valley, remains closed, but they're saying they hope to reopen that at 7 this evening, so half an hour to go, they hope. So keep an eye on that on the website. There's also a list of other roads where they are advising caution. So if you are travelling, get on that site and have a look. State Highway 10, Kyle, State Highway 16, Wellsford to Kapakapa. There's a few of them. Check them out if you're thinking of getting in your car and travelling in the Northland area. Lots of roads that have suffered damage, or you need to exercise extra caution. Now, ko te kaupapa tuatahi Pōpō, tomorrow from 5 a.m. First Up speaks to Green Party co-leader Marama Davidson about who should foot the bill for managed retreat and the Elizabeth Kerikeri fiasco. That'll be an interesting conversation, so do tune in. Stay safe and dry overnight. 5 a.m. for First Up, and we'll catch you a little later in the day.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Good evening, I'm Evie Ashton. Met Service has lifted most of its warnings for Auckland as the worst of the weather appears to be over. The rain caused widespread flooding which resulted in almost 300 weather-related call-outs, and hundreds of commuters were stranded for hours after many buses, trains and ferries were cancelled or delayed. The bad weather, however, has moved east into Bay of Plenty, with reports of flooding in Rotorua and traffic at a standstill.